Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Work Maintenance Manager. In this training, I'm going to show you how to create this incredible maintenance manager complete with work orders, a custom scheduler, equipment, technicians, customers, a fully customizable admin screen, and we're going to tie it all together with this incredible dashboard. It's all coming up right now, right here, so let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me. I've got a really fantastic training. This was requested by one of our great students, so I really appreciate all of the recommendations. So thank you, Lars Holden, for recommending this. I appreciate this. He asked us, I want to see a work maintenance manager complete with the ability to track customers, maintenance, technicians, jobs. And so that Excel is a great tool to do that. And we're going to show you every step how we did that. I'm going to add in a schedule on top of that. Give us fully customizable schedule, able to navigate months. We're going to have automated custom navigation. We will also have icons that we can, based on custom status, we will have priorities. We've got a list of equipment here, technicians, also of course a list of customers, and of course an admin screen where we're going to be able to customize colors, such as for priority. We'll be able to add icons for the scheduling. We'll have individual folders to track pictures and files, maintenance types, skills list, a schedule, and a whole lot more. Excel is a powerful tool, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. So get ready for the training. It's going to be incredible. We're going to go over every function, every type of formula. We're going to go over these really cool dashboards where we got slices and pivot charts. I've got a bunch of orders. We'll be able to save and add customers and a whole lot more for you. So I hope you stick with us for the entire training, because there's so much to cover in this incredible application. If you like these trainings, I create these for you each and every Tuesday. All right, this application is absolutely free. All you need to do is click down in the description there. I've got some links for you for both email and Facebook Messenger, and we're going to get this sent over to you. If you'd like to support us, there are so many great ways to support these free trainings. One of them is, obviously, you can get a full 200 work pack of my best templates, and it's just $77. That's a great way to do that. That link will be below. Another way is, of course, to support us on our Patreon platform. Patreon platform is a great way to do it, because you get involved directly with me and what you want to see. For example, if you want to see me add something like drag and drop scheduling, if you want to see me create automated work orders, or there's a feature or maybe a fix on any one of these trainings, you can have that done for you. And everybody else, all you need to do is see the posts in my Patreon platform, recommend what you want to see, and I'm going to try to get that done for you. That's our Patreon. Now, of course, we also have downloadable PDFs. We have early trading, so you can get in early. You can get all these pictures, resources, and icons also in our resources package on Patreon. So that's a great way to support us. All right, let's get started on this. I've got this obviously 6 or 7-part training. We've got a dashboard, orders, right, a schedule, equipment, technicians, customers, and an admin. So we're going to be going over each part of this, right? These are individual sheets, okay? In this particular training, I'm going to be using Excel 2000, the latest Excel 2019, 2020, depending upon what version you have, but this is the latest. So we're going to be using that this time, right? It depends. What do you like to see? I've been using 2010 in the past, right? Because I want to make sure we don't add features. But if you want to see me use these newer versions, let me know in the comments below. I always appreciate your comments, your likes, your shares. That really helps us. So this is what we're going to be creating, the Work Maintenance Manager, our admin screen. Let's just go over some of the features. I've got a specific folder set for our technicians. Our technicians have pictures. Those pictures are visible here inside our schedule, right? We've got an icon that shows the status, we've got a different color, and we've got our technician picture. So if we zoom in, it's kind of small there, but if we zoom in, we can see our technician's picture there. And also we've got a lot more than that. So inside our admin, let's move that over here. I've got also, right, an equipment pictures folder. Notice that our equipment we have the ability to add and display equipment, add equipment to specific orders, and those equipment can be repaired or whatever, and the frequency at which we want them repaired. But we need those pictures stored in a folder, so that is going to be on our admin, and we'll be able to browse for that right here. I've also got icons and attachments. Attachments is something I'd like to add for you. In fact, we can add that on our Patreon platform. I may do that. So this includes equipment, but I may want to do attachments. and icons. Icons are really cool. Why is that important? If we take a look back on our admin screen and we see we have an order status, we have a pending order status, scheduled, in process, and completed. And I've got a specific icon located in a folder, in this particular folder, and this icon, these white icons, will be displayed on the schedule based on the specific status of an order, pending. So if we take a look inside the schedule, we can see that we have different icons. So if we zoom in, we've got these different icons. We've got job in progress, we've got completed, we've got pending here, this one. So those icons can be dynamic and we can display them, and they're automatically going to get refreshed as we move and navigate through them and the jobs that are scheduled on that. So a lot of really, really cool things that we get to show you on that. And also in the admin screen, we've got scheduling. Do we want our scheduling to start on what day? Maybe we want to schedule on Monday. And then, of course, that schedule is going to automatically, once we refresh it, it's automatically going to be refreshed. And we see it starts on Monday now. So our schedule can start on any day of the week. If we decide we want to start it on Sunday and we go back to schedule, refreshing the schedule, it's now going to start on Sunday. So we've got a fully dynamic schedule. We can select the year, we can refresh it here, and we can navigate, of course. So that's going to come from the admin screen. What days do we want to show, right? I'm going to develop this. This one, I'd like to add some conditional formatting on this so we can hide or show just our certain days we want. We can select those work days on a single click. We can have a selection there. Obviously, went over the order status. We've got maintenance types. What type of maintenance type is it for a particular job, right? If I have a specific order here, and I'm going to be installing a brand new particular, or maybe I want to do a new install, or maybe we're going to fix it, what type of maintenance are we going to do? Is it a repair? Is it a replacement, inspection? So I want to be able to know what type it is. And I want to know what maybe a specific location. If it's in the kitchen, I want to know about that. And we may want to save it. And so I want to be able to display that, right? And I also want to be able to save the order. I want to maybe make some updates to some customers, and we're going to save that customer too. Okay, so we also have frequencies. How often should we complete this job, right? If we take a look inside the orders, we've got a list of frequencies. Right, I need to know if it's every day, how often we do it. Maybe we want to go back every 6 months, right? So this particular job, we want this reoccurring every 6 months, so we can save that. And then we can have that order saved, and it'll reoccur actually every 6 months. So we're going to save that information in there. All right, so that's what really important. We've got those frequencies because we have to know how often that we're going to reset. We've got times, a list of times and durations. That is going to also help us out on orders because we want to know when to schedule this, right? If I've got a specific time of this appointment, I want to change that time, and I want to maybe change that duration. I want to be able to do that with the drop-down list and then saving that update. Okay, I also want to be able to filter those orders. I want to know orders. Are we going to include completed orders, or we're not going to include completed orders, right? If we decide we're not going to include completed orders, only those that are open, right? We may want to search a specific customer. We may want to search by a specific order ID, or maybe we want to search by a specific customer, right? We can do that here too. If we want to search all Mary's customers, all Mary's jobs, we can do that, right? Or maybe we want to search by a specific equipment that was installed. I want to know where this equipment was installed. So let's take a look inside here. If I got air conditioning, I want to know when air. I know that air conditioning was installed or worked on in these 3 particular jobs. If we include the completed, of course, it's going to be a lot more than that. So we can do that. So there's a lot more we can do on that. We can clear the filter and show that, all the jobs that we want to do. All right, so how are we going to do this? So there's a really, really great search and filter that I'm going to be showing you here. So we're going to do all of that. All right, let's just start out with this really cool menu. If we take a look at this, we've got a little shape-based menu here, and each one of these are individual sheets. So we've got our admin sheet, our dashboard, orders, we have a scheduling sheet, an equipment sheet, right? So if we want to get to those sheets, we can use these quick locks, right? So all I need to do is just click here or here or here. And so these individual shapes are based on the individual sheet. We then have a few database sheets. That's just for the data. So I've got an orders database. This is going to track all of our orders, right? All our orders going to store all that information. I've got our order equipment database. These are the equipment that are stored on those specific orders. So if we were to take a look in order number 1, we could see that as well. So back into the orders, right? If we want to look in a specific order, we can do that as well. So there's a lot we can do. So we want to know what equipment, like these two equipment were on this order number 6, right? So we want to make sure that we store that. Notice order number 6 has 2 different equipments. So we want to store that in a database as well. That's for every specific order number. And I've also got some pivot tables that we're going to be going over. All right, so let's get into the menu and see exactly how we created this really cool menu. Well, basically what these are, it's just a few lines of code. In fact, it's just one line of code along with 2 supporting lines of code on this. So the most important thing is to create these shapes. So that's what I've done here. I've created these shapes, and also what I've done is I've created 2 different icons for each one. So each shape, each screen has both a white and a blue icon. Notice that when it is off color, that dashboard has that white icon, whereas it has the dark blue. And keep in mind that when it is off, right, those off colors are going to be in white. So all I did was pretty much create some shapes here. And it's very, very easy because I created this shape and then I placed this icon right on top of here. Now the important thing is when you're developing a menu like this and you don't want to use a lot of code to do it, is critical with the naming of the shapes, right? So let's take a look at some of the naming that we have. And we see inside the shapes here, we see that we have this called let's take a look at this one on here. This particular shape here, we see the selected shape is called dashboard, right? That is the shape name. And when I select a single shape, we can see that name up here, dashboard, right? So we have to make sure that the name of the shape is exactly the same as the name of the sheet. Very, very important. Name of sheet, and that's also the name, of course, of our code name sheet. So we want to make sure that we're consistency. And that means, and that includes both for the icon and the shape itself has to have the same name. Okay, make sure you can use this, right? You can edit those names directly in here inside the selection panel, and that's an easier way to do that. But keep in mind that each shape, right, is exactly the same name as the sheet shape. When we have that kind of consistency, it makes it very easy inside the code to then switch on that. Now, of course, you can use hyperlinks as well to switch sheets, but also I prefer VBA too. You know, I like VBA, but hyperlinks would work just as well. We can hyperlink these as well. So to do that, of course, we would just add that hyperlink. All right, but the best way to do it in VBA, we're going to assign a macro to that. And these shapes, we get to assign a macro. So we're going to call this menu select. And the good thing about that is, regardless of the icon, regardless of the button, all of them are tied to a single macro, So when we edit that macro, we're going to go into the VBA editor. When we take a look at this, that VBA editor, we can also use Alt F11 to reach there, Alt F11. You can also get there through the Developers tab, and the Developers tab is right here, and using the Visual Basic. You can also get to that Developers tab inside the options, right? And then also you have the customize the ribbon, and you want to make sure that that developer tab is selected. So we're going to go inside the developers tab. We can close this for now. Inside that in the Visual Basic, what we have is I've got a few applications and a few different modules, right? I've got 4 different modules. Each module has a set number of macros. So we're going to focus on the application macros. And the macro that we were just talking about is called menu select. And actually all the work is done by a single line of code. And I've wrapped that around application screen updating false, and then we're going to turn it on to true, and that makes a lot less flashing. So remember, the names are critical, right? The names are critical. So the name of the shape that called it is called application caller. That's the name of the shape. So if I take that name of the shape and I use the same name, the sheet name, notice that these sheet names are dashboard, equipment, right? Customers, right? So all of them have the same sheet name. So if I do that, this is going to activate it. And I simply wrap that around screen updating false and screen updating true. That makes the flashing a lot less. And that's all we have to do. So one single macro to control all those menus. Consistency, the only important thing that you need to remember is when you focus on is those names. As long as the name of the shape is the same as the name of the sheet, then you're good to go. That single line of code will help you. Also keep in mind that if you do try to run this particular macro from here, you're going to get a bug. And that's simply because there's no shape that called it, right? It's looking for a shape. You didn't call it from a shape because we called it from this little run, continue, or F5, right? And that's why. So you'll need to run this particular macro, or anything with application caller in it must be run directly from a shape on the screen. Okay, that is it. All right, we've got a few different macros on the admin screen while we're going over just a few, and that's have to do with browsing with folders. So if we scroll down here to the admin screen here, we've got different, right? I want to be able to browse for a particular folder. If I click here, I want to browse for the specific folder that we have, right? So how are we going to do that? That's going to put that file path of that folder directly in this cell for technicians in E5 or E6 or E7. So that's relatively a simple macro. We're just going to browse for that. And that's we have basically 3 different browse for technician, equipment, and attachment folder, right? And also equipment pictures, so that's a little bit different. But this particular one, right, all we need to do is we're going to focus on the job folder as a file dialog. What we're going to do is we're going to set that file dialog, right? We're going to dimension that job folder as a folder picker, right? We're looking for a folder picker under the application file dialog. Then we're going to focus on that with the job folder. We're going to set a title as browse for the technician folder, right? We're going to allow multi-select, and that's false, right? We only want them to select one single folder. Therefore, the allow multi-select must be false. If .show doesn't equal -1, then go to no selection. And that means when they do not make any kind of selection, right, we want them to skip this step, right? So that step is basically going to take that entire folder path and place that directly in E5 on our admin screen. That's it. The others are exactly the same, except we're placing it in E6 and E7. That is it, okay? We also have a refreshment equipment pictures, right? This is a simple macro that what I want to do is I want to be able to take the equipment pictures, and here's our equipment, and I want to refresh those. I want to list all those equipment pictures. Now remember, we need a few things to get those equipment pictures. I want those stored in a specific folder, and I've got them right here inside a folder called equipment pics. This is the folder that I have. This is that folder that we browse for. So here's all of our equipment pictures, right? Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that the names of those pictures are exactly the same as the names in our picture file. So when we combine this picture file name along with this particular folder here, this folder, along with a backslash, one additional backslash, then we are going to get the full file path of that picture. So what I want to do is I want to be able to create a link. And that link, I want to be able to refresh those pictures, run this macro, and have all those pictures refresh. We also want to give those pictures a specific name. This is called equipment 4, basically on row 4, equipment 5, equipment 6, and so on and so forth. So when I refresh those pictures, the first thing that I want to do is I want to delete every single picture in here. I want to make sure that they're deleted using the macro. The refresh picture will then clear that out and then add the new ones. So how are we going to do that? Well, we can do that through this little macro right here. The first thing what we want to do is we want to dimension the last row. I need to know the last row of the picture, right? If we're going to loop through all the rows, our last row is row 44. So we're going to loop from 4 through 44. We're going to look for this. If this, we're going to combine that with the folder. If we do find a correct file path, we're going to place that picture. So we're going to focus also on the equipment folder as a string and the full file path, meaning the folder along with the name of the picture is going to create our equipment path. And we also want to remove all the existing shapes. So we're going to dimension the equipment shape as a shape. So the first thing we want to do, as mentioned, is remove all the existing shapes. But I don't want to remove all the shapes on the sheet, right? Because I've got other shapes here, a lot of other shapes. I only want to remove the shapes that are right here in this list in column J. So how do we do that? Well, if you see, each one of those pictures contains the word equipment item, and then there's a number. So if they each start with equipment item or equip item, then what I need to do is check to see if the shape name contains equip item. If it does, then delete it. And that's just what we've done here using the in-string command. If it doesn't, it could result in an error. Therefore, we've wrapped that around on error, resume next, and on error, go to 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to check for each shape on the sheet. We're going to loop through every single shape in the entire sheet. The equipment dot shapes, we're going to loop, and what we're going to do is we're going to check for the name. if the equipment shape name contains equipment item, and that's greater than 0, meaning it is found, at least one instance of that has been found in the shape, then we are going to delete that shape. And that's all we have to do. We just loop through that, and that's going to loop through every shape on the sheet, and it is going to allow them to delete it. So once we've deleted it, we then want to add the new one. So the first thing we need to do is determine the last row based on column C. Our equipment ID is now in column C. We've left 2 columns for our menu. So inside column C, we're going to get the last row. If the last row is less than 4, that means there are no items, and we can exit out of the sub. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is I want to take that path, that equipment path located in the admin screen in E6, and I want to put that in a variable called equipment folder. And then what I want to do is I want to loop through all the items in that list, starting in row 4. To do that, we just want to I also want to make sure that our equipment path contains the correct value. So what we're going to do is we're going to build that equipment path. It's going to be that equipment folder. And then remember, we're going to put in that backslash as I remember. Then what we're going to want to do is we want to take the contents of column I, and the equipment row. Now, column I, of course, contains our picture file name. So the combination of that file name plus the file folder is going to be our full file path. However, we don't know if it is a correct path yet, so we do need to check for that. We can use the directory command to do just that. If the directory equipment path VB directory equals empty, that means it is an incorrect path. What we want to do is we want to skip it because something's wrong. So we're going to go to the next item. And what that's going to do is going to skip all this and go right here to the next item in the loop. However, if it is correct, we want to insert that. We're going to use the pictures command, pictures.insert. We're going to insert that full file path. What I'm going to do right then is give it a specific name. We know we want to give it the equipment item, right? That's very important because we need to be able to remove those. And then what we're going to do is we're going to assign it a very unique number based on the row, which is fine. As long as they're unique, we're going to do that. Once it's entered, then I want to work with it. I want to give it a specific size and a location. So to do that, we can then focus on that with the shape's equipment name and the equipment row. With that new shape that we just created, we can then work with it. I'm going to give it a left position. The left position is going to be based on the equipment. Remember, I need to call out the sheet once again because I'm inside another width. So that's very important. Equipment, and then I'm going to focus on column J and the equipment row. I want to place it on the left, but I'm going to move it over. I don't want it directly on that left border. I want to move it a little bit to the right. So we're going to move it 10 pixels to the right. Then also I'm going to give it a top position, also based on column J and the equipment row, and a top position, but I don't want it right on the top. I want to move it down a little bit so that it's a little bit off the top. And then I want to lock that aspect ratio. If I'm going to be resizing that height or that width, I want to make sure that we lock the aspect ratio. That's very important. So we can do that with lock aspect ratio equals MSO true. Then I'm going to set the height. I'm going to set that height as to the maximum of the rows. And this is helpful because it is going to be based on the row height so that it doesn't go beyond the height of this row. So whatever the row of the height is going to be the picture. And that's kind of nice because if I change the row of the height here, if I change the height of those rows and then we refresh the picture, it's automatically going to be based on that. So I can refresh the picture here and you see the pictures are going to be bigger. And we can also return it back to what it was. We know that it was 32, so we just have to go back down and then change those rows to 32. So it's very, very nice and handy if we have that based on that, so we can resize the pictures accordingly. And all we need to do is just refresh, and they're going to return back to their original size. So it's going to be based on the height of that row. To do that, we can set that height is going to be equal to the equipment row, and the equipment row means the entire row. The height of that row minus 4 means I don't want it the exact height. I want it a little bit less than the height. That's it. That's all we have to do to create those equipment items. And it's a nice look, right? So it's always going to be based on that specific row height. So if you want a less row height, you can do that. A very easy way to display those pictures. Very good. So we've got that covered. And next up, what I'd like to do, that's it. That's all we need to do for our application macros. And you notice we have some orders here. So we've got a lot of orders and some macros in the order. So let's go back into the orders and we're going to focus on this. In this, we've got some filtering mechanisms here that we went over. We've got the ability to save an order. We can add a new order. We can load an order by selecting something. We can print the order, we can delete an order, we can also save and update the customer. If we want to add a new customer, we can do just that, right? If I want to add Fred's brother, Fredder's Roger, and then I can do just that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Main Street. We can add, is it just simply save or update the customer? It's going to automatically save that new customer. So if we take a look inside the customers and we see that this has now been added, our brand new customer has been added. So it's a really cool feature to be able to add customers very quickly and very easily. So how are we going to do that? Well, the best way to do that is to be able to simply know what customer row is. So we've got to know a few things. We've got to know what customer row is on. If it's a new customer, we need to know that. We also need to know if it's a new order. So we've got a few order and also want to know some equipment. And we want to be able to add some equipment into the specific order as we went over. So we're going to go over the macros that do all of that for us. So let's take a look inside the VBA code and inside this module and see just how we did it. It's called the order macros module. And of course, I need to dimension a few variables to help us along with these macros. So the order row is the row that order is on. And I also need to know the order column. We're going to use data mapping, and I'll be going over that. Order column, we're going to have to loop through the columns. I also want to know the database of that equipment row. Remember, we have individual equipment. We need to know the row where this equipment is stored. Okay. That's important. So I need to know that row. Also, I need to know the information of the last row if we're looping through, and the equipment row. What row is, I need to know what row the equipment is on, right? Is it on 21, 20? Where is that row? Because we're going to have to loop through the equipment and make sure we add it. So we'll need to be adding. It's going to go from that and determine how we add those equipment, because we can add multiple equipments on that. All right, so continuing on. So we're going to dimension that, and I also need to know the equipment folder, right? If I'm going to be displaying that, I need to know what folder our equipment's stored in. The file path, the selected row, the last results row, and the results row. We're going to be running an advanced filter, so I need to know that. Okay, the first thing what I want to do is I want to be able to load this list, right? If we saw this list, we can load this list based on a customer. We can use a filter here. So we need to reload this list based on the search value. If we search for a specific ID, I need to know that. I need to reload this list. If I clear it, I need to do that. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to be able to clear this list automatically and load the list? Well, the first thing what we want to do is we want to make a change. When the user makes a change here to F5, or when they make the change here, I want to load a macro, right? If I select this here, we're going to run a macro. Or we select this clear button, we are going to run a macro. So there's some macros that are associated with that. So that's called load list. Now this is going to be interesting because there's two different databases. We know that our order ID and our customer are stored in one database. If we take a look at the order ID, we've got order ID in our order database, and we've got customer. So if I'm going to be filtering those, that's great. But however, what if I want to filter equipment? Now we notice that our equipment here is stored on here. All the equipment here and the orders here, right? So if I load order number 1, we see we're going to get these 4 different equipments, right? If I take a look in orders and I decide I'm going to search order number 1 and I want to select that order number 1, we see that we've got these 4 different equipments, right? So we need to know if I want to search for a specific oven, or if I want to search for, I've got a different database, right? We're either searching for customers and orders in one database or equipment in another one. So keep that in mind. That's going to be different. So order equipment database, we're going to create a brand new different advanced filter based on what was entered here. So back into that first macro. So we're going to focus, the first thing we need to do on this load list macro is clear out the current list with the orders B6. And this is our selected row, B6, and I'll go over that. I should go over that now to help you out. So B6 is the selected row. If I select a row, I need to know what row is selected. So let's take a look in columns A and B and see what we have here. B6 here is that selected row. I'll go over these things as we go in the code. So we're going to use conditional formatting for that. So if we go in to our home here and we see conditional formatting and we manage those rules, we see that I've created a few different rules. One's going to be based on our mod row. Look at the mod row here. Mod meaning even rows, mod meaning odd rows. So I want to color those odd or even rows based on 2 conditions. One, E7, our first row, doesn't equal empty, or E7, and of course our even rows here and our odd rows here. Our odd rows are going to be colored light blue. Our even rows are going to be colored white. However, our selected row here in B6, I want to give that our theme color, which is that fade from dark blue to a little lighter blue. I want to bold the font, and I want to make it white. So you can see that clearly here, and it applies to all of them. So I want to make sure that when we make a selection on a selection change, that's when we want it to run. So B6, we certainly need to clear out, right? Because once we clear it, we want to clear that. And I also want to make sure that we clear all the data. So from E7 all the way down to F in the last row or whatever, we want to make sure we clear that out. So we do that here, clearing the contents of the orders. Then what I need to do is I need to determine what sheet are we going to. If this says equipment, and then I want to search for a specific equipment such as air conditioning or part of it perhaps, I want to know those orders that contain air conditioning. So that's going to be a filter. So I need to differentiate between those two databases based on what is in F4. If F4 is equipment, we are going to be searching this here, this database here. However, if it is either order ID or customer, we are going to be searching our orders database here. So we need to differentiate that inside the code here. So we can do that here. So if orders F4, I've just added this equipment, and I want to make sure that enter search, we have not added any particular search term, right? We want to make sure that it's not the default search term. The user actually entered some type of a search term inside directly inside here. It's called F5, right? I want to make sure F5 doesn't contain. When we clear that out, we see it contains enter search. So enter search would not help us. And also, I want to make sure that they've actually entered something other than enter search in there. So to do that, right, I want to make sure that both of those are contained. Then in that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on that order equipment database, that database. First thing I want to do is I want to clear any previous results. We're going to have results. We're going to run this through an advanced filter, this order equipment order database, and that advanced filter is going to be right here. The criteria is going to be here, and I'm going to have those results come here directly in here. But this is the interesting part. I only want those results to come here and here. Okay, so we need to clear out any previous results all the way from Y3 down to Z. So clearing those out through columns Y3 and Z. Now what I want to do is I want to determine the last row of that database. If it's less than 3, we're going to exit the sub, right? There's no data. I'm going to run an advanced filter from A2 through B, right? I really want to focus on just two things, the order ID and the equipment name. Notice there's no customer name in the database. Now, theoretically, I could have put it in, but there's no need. So what I'm going to have to do is use a formula. I'm going to extract that customer name directly from here in our original order. So if I know I've got order ID 1, I'm then going to extract Betty White from that, using that. So all I need to return is this order ID, but I need to run a filter based on the equipment name. So we're going to focus only on columns A and B in our original data inside there. So only A and B. We're going to run a filter. We want to copy that to a new range. We're going to use criteria V2 through V3, right? I only want to focus on the criteria of that equipment name. Equipment name is here. However, what I want to do is I want to add a formula here. It's going to be based on F5. If F5 equals enter search, right, then does not, right, just only those that doesn't equal empty. Otherwise, I want to put an asterisk. Otherwise, it's not enter search, and I want to search for anything they containing. Notice that I put in just the words air, and it could be air conditioning or anything that contains the word air. So I'm going to use an asterisk by it. That wildcard is going to be before whatever they've entered, then F5, which is the cell that they've entered the text, and then after asterisk. So for example, if I go back into the orders and I decide that I'm going to search by equipment, and I'm going to put in the words air here, and I'm going to search, I want only those jobs were there. So what that's going to do is going to put this air right in our criteria. It's going to return those 3 orders. Only those 3 orders contain it, right? 1, 2, and 3, right? If we take a look at order number 1, we've got aircon here. In 2, then we got air conditioning here. And in 3, we have another one somewhere around here, all the way down, air fryer. So you see those 3 orders, air fryer, they all contain air and air. So we want to make sure that any equipment containing air. So I've got 3 different orders. But what I also want to do is I also want to return the customer name, not only the order ID. So I need to extract that using a formula. So how can I do that? Well, I can bring down a formula. Let's take a look back inside here. So our results are going to come here directly in Y2. So if we take a look inside the code, our Y2 is where our results are going to go. I'm going to determine the last row of that, the last row, using column Y, in this case, it's 5, right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down a formula. Now, all I need to do is just store a formula up here. And here's the formula. What we're going to do is we're going to index orders and the customer name. This is a named range for all the customer names in our orders. We go into Formulas Name Manager, and we see that we have under the order customer name here. So tabbing over that, it is going to be an offset formula for all the customer names on a specific order. So I'm going to index that. I'm going to base it on our order ID, right? So I've got another one called order ID here. So let's go back in here and go to the name manager and take a look at the order ID. So now order ID is also an offset formula, and it's for this specific order. It encompasses all of the orders ID called named range called order ID. So understanding those two, what I've got here is we're going to index that customer name. We're going to run a match based on what it's in Y3, is that first order ID. If it's found, what I want to do is I want to return that customer name, and it's just in that single column. Otherwise, if it's an error, just return blank. So then using VBA, all I need to do is copy down only those formulas where we have rows. So I don't need to create formulas for the entire column, only those rows. So here, I'm going to bring down 3 formulas. So that's exactly what we're going to do in the next line of code. Z3 through Z in the last results row formula, remember we're focused on just the formula, equals whatever formula is located in Z1. We're going to extract the customer name via an index match formula. All right, so once we have that, all I need to do is then take these results and bring them directly over into our order sheet and bring them right inside here. That's all I need to do. Now, notice that we're running a macro on a selection of a lot. I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to show you exactly that. Then all we need to do is load the list. So we'll get to that in just a moment, and we bring in those values on the order screen. That's it. So that's if it is a specific equipment, right? If we're searching equipment, but what if we're searching orders? What if I'm searching customers and I want to know everything by specific customer name, right? In this case, let's clear the filter, and I only want to know, let's see, everything for Betty White, right? So all Betty White's orders are here. I want to search by customer name. So if in this case here, F4 is either, of course, customer or order ID, then I want to do something else. So, and of course, that would be else. Search by customer or order ID. Now we're going to be focused on the orders database. So we're going to run an advanced filter based on this particular database. And we want that criteria to be directly in here. It's going to be based on this, but there's more than one component. It's going to be either customer or order ID. So this criteria here, this header criteria is going to change. If the orders F4 equal equipment, then just put in the order ID. Otherwise, F4. So this header is going to be changing based on what it is. So if I go back into the orders and I change it to order ID, you're going to see that header change automatically inside the order. So now it's going to be order ID. So whatever it is, whether it's customers or order ID, whatever the user enters, I want to enter it here and here because I need to search. I want completion date for both doesn't equal empty and equals empty, regardless of that, but possibly based on a formula. Remember, it's a little bit tricky here because we're basing it on 2 conditions. Why is that? Well, if we take a look inside here, I need to understand whether we're going to be searching for only those jobs that include completed or those that are not included completed, right? So I want to know that. So if I want to search included or not, it's going to be based on this. And if we take a look at this option here, we format the control, and we take a look in the cell, and this is connected to cell B2. So B2 is either going to be false or true based on that. So what I want to do is I want to know based on B2, and that's going to have our criteria. So if we look back in the order database, our completion date is also, if the orders is be true, right? We do want to show, then I want to make sure the completion date is not empty, right? If we have our completion date, these have been completed, these have not. So I only want to return those with that a non-blank for completed date. So to do that, we use does not equal. And then also what I want to do is I want to make sure that we're equaling here. This is going to equal here automatically. So we can add that in there. So I'm going to run that criteria based on here T2 through U4. So we're going to have that criteria. That is our criteria here, T2 through U4. We want those results X2 through XY. I want those results to come here. I only want the order number and I only want the customer. Once I determine the last row of those results, I can then bring them inside our orders. So we can do that here. That last results row is going to be based on column X. If it's less than 3, we can exit the sub out. And then the orders E7 through F in the last results row plus 4. Why are we adding 4? Look, our results start in row 3 here. However, on our order screen, our results start in row 7. So we need to compensate so we can by adding 4 to that. Now, Also, when we make a selection change, we're going to load it, and I'll show you that in just a moment. So we want those results to come in directly. So bringing that in, that's it, the last result. So it's going to bring all those in. Bring in, just type that in, bring in order ID and customer name. Great, but you notice we also have another macro called clear filter. This is super easy, right? All we need to do is change F5 to enter search. So if I change that clear F5 enter search, it's automatically. So if I'm searching for an order and I want to clear that filter, all I need to do is change this. And how is that? Well, because this macro, this particular macro that we just went over called orders load list, that is going to run. It's going to run when we make a change to F5, and that's based on a worksheet change event. On our order screen here, we have a worksheet change event, right? And when we make a change to F5, then we're going to run that macro. If not intersection F5, we want to run the macro. Run macro to load list on cell change. That's great. Okay, so we see that. Now we understand how we're going to load that automatically and clear it. But how do we actually load an order? Notice this. That is on selection change. So on selection change, I want something to happen. While we're on this screen here, we're going to scroll down and we're going to look at our selection change event. First thing what I want to do is you notice that that macro ran when I selected more than one cell. I don't want that. How can I avoid that? Well, I can just put in one line of code. So we can do that here. And I'll put it right down here after our calendar. We do have a pop-up calendar. Forgot to show that to you, but that's pretty cool. That's been updated. So we're going to get on that. And of course, we can change the colors of that however we like. So let's go ahead and write that in. If target.countLarge is greater than 1, then exit the sub. And that means if the user has selected more than one cell, then exit the sub. And that usually works just fine, except we do have to be careful using, let's fix that, then exit the sub. That works just fine as long as we're not making changes on selection changes, right? If we have a merged cell that contains more than one cell and we want something to happen, like for example, this is a merged cell. If I want something to happen when I select this, keep that in mind that that's more than one cell. Okay, so now when I select more than one cell that I've added that code, nothing's going to happen. It's only going to happen when I select more than one cell. And that's just what I want. Okay, great. So when I make a selection from E7 all the way to F, and I want to make sure that there's a value in E7, I want something to happen. So we can focus on this right now. When we make a selection down here, let's take a look inside here, E7 through F9N, on selection of orders, what do we want to do? I want to make sure that first that E contains a value, right? If we select anything that E doesn't contain a value, if I go all the way down to the bottom of these rows, and E doesn't contain a value, I don't want anything to happen, right? So I need to add more in here, but I want to make sure that E contains a value. So how do we do that? And we also want to create here, and E in the target row doesn't equal W. Then I want to make sure that B3 is going to take on that order ID. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run our load. So how are we going to do that? All right, well, let me explain that. The first thing is I'm going to do two things. One, we need to set the order ID, and two, we need to select the selected row. Notice I got conditional formatting. That conditional formatting is not extending all the way down here just to save some space. So keep that in mind. Our conditional formatting, as we know, let's go into that and see why that does happen. And we manage rows. Notice that our conditional formatting is only going to row 329. That might be sufficient. You can add more. That is exactly why when I selected all the way down here, although the job did load, right, there's no conditional formatting just to save some space. Keep that in mind. Okay, so there's two things that I want to happen. One, I want to set that selected row inside B6 here. And I also want to set that order ID, and I want to put that order ID in B3. Very important. That order ID goes in B3. So whatever order we select. So those are the two things that's going to happen. B3 is going to take on that order ID. That's going to come directly from E and whatever the target row. And also, I want to put the row that they've selected, and I'm going to place that into B6. That's going to trigger our conditional formatting. The next thing we do is simply run the macro to load the order. And I'm going to go over that in just a moment. Okay, so that is all we have to do. Let's take a look at this. Now, when I do load an order, I need to know to make sure that there's a row. I need to know what row is associated with that order. That is the row inside the database here. So if we take a look inside the database and we see that order ID row 5 is on row 8. So I need to make sure that we know that that row is it. So 5, we know 5 is on row 8 here. I want that row. So we can use our match to determine that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say whatever's in B3, that's going to be our order ID, and we're going to run a match based on that. I'm going to add 3 rows because our first order starts on row 4. If there's an error, show empty. As long as we have that order row, I can then load all of the information into these cells using data mapping. If you haven't seen this before, our data mapping is here. It's up the top in the first row. And basically, all I've done is map the customer to I5, right? I5 here inside our order is located right here. So I want to put that I5 directly in here. I want to put that address directly in I6. And so if we take a look inside our orders database, so what I want to do now, actually, I10, let's go in the next one, schedule date, go into the dashboard here, customers, this comes directly from the customer. So when I change that, this is always going to come, this address is going to come directly from the information. I don't need to save that inside the order database because it's going to come directly from the customer. Every time we make a change in the customer, the address is going to come directly from here. I'll show you that in just a moment. However, we want to save the rest of this information using data mapping. So if we see I10 here, is that scheduled on date? So we go back into the orders database, we see that I10, the time is K10. So that is data mapping. All I need to do is loop through 2 all the way to the last row to load that information. And it's going to load in whatever order we've done. So it's going to take all this information and it's going to bring it directly over into the associated cells. As soon as I make a change on the customer, I want that customer to load the information in. That's on change event. Now we just went over with change event, right? But let's go over another one. So when I make a change, but the first thing I need to know is I want to make sure that that customer has been saved, right? I need to know the row that's associated. I need to know that Betty White is on row 4 or that Dolores Richmond is on row 5. So how are we going to do that? Well, we need to set a row. And I've got that right here inside B8. It's going to be based on that customer row. So if I change this to Betty White at the top of the list, we know that that's on row 4. So if I know that I've got a customer row, if a user makes a change to I4, and I know that that row is correct, I can then load all the information in, and that's going to become on the change event. So we go into the order screen here where we are now, and we're going to make a change. We're going up again, back up here to the worksheet change event. Right? So on the next one, we already focused on F5, right? We know we're going to load those orders. But now what I want to do is I want to focus on the customer name, on a customer name change. If the user makes a change to I4, and I want to make sure that B8 does not equal empty, right? Does not equal empty. If it's an existing customer, do this, right? That means that it is an existing customer. If they make a change, right, or they decide to add something, or they delete, let's say they delete it, right? What do I want to happen? Maybe they want to enter a brand new customer here. Notice there's no row, so that would be the else, meaning it's not empty here. Else, what do we want to do? Else, clear all the contents of those cells. So if anytime B8 equals empty, clear these cells. What if it's not empty? I want to load in all the customer information. So we're going to dimension the customer row as long. And the customer row is going to be, of course, based on what is in B8. And then all I need to do is simply bring over from the customer database, column D is going to be the customer name, column E, the address, city, and state, bringing all that information and bringing it into the individual cells of the job order. That's it all. Just bringing all those individuals into the cells. So that's in the change event. That's how we bring the customer information into here. And it's going to come directly from. Now notice that there is a lot of lines of code here, right? I did not use data mapping. I could have, but it would have saved me a few lines of code. So some people are asking, why didn't you use data mapping? Maybe I didn't because I kind of wanted this clean look. I could have hidden a row here, but it was a few lines of code, but I could have used it and then hidden the rows, but I wanted a clean look. So we don't have data mapping on this. So without data mapping, we have to write more lines of code, right? Data mapping is always 3 lines of code. If you have a large database, you won't want to use this. So notice there's a lot of lines of code when we don't use data mapping. So that's how we do it. That's how we load the customer. Now keep that in mind that I want this regardless if it is an existing job or new. If the user is entering this manually by selecting here, or they're selecting a specific job, both of those conditions are going to change this right here, right? Both of them are going to change that. So every time I set this up, so I want to make sure that regardless on load or regardless if it's a new order and the user makes a change, both of those instances, I want that address to load. So all we need to do is save the customer information in the job all I need to do is save that customer name here. If I enter that customer name in I5 on load, that automatically it will load their address. It makes it a lot easier. Great, so we got that. So we're gonna focus on those orders. We're going back into the orders and we're focused on this. So we know how we load a list. We know how we clear the filter. Why don't we focus in order? And we're gonna go, how do we save these orders, right? I wanna be able to save them. This is where data mapping is gonna come in and save us a lot of time. Notice we've got a lot of fields. I need to save all of these fields into the orders database, right? But what I have is I need to know, is it a brand new order or is it an existing order? That's very important, right? So we need to differentiate between, if it's a new order, how am I going to know? What we're going to do is we're going to clear out the order ID. When I clear out the order ID, it's going to return not a row. It's going to be an error, so that's going to be blank. We're going to use that before being blank to determine if it is a new order, which it is now, or if it's an existing order, then it's going to have a row. So we can differentiate that based on before. So let's take a look inside here. First of all, I want them to make sure that they have at least a customer, right? I want to make sure that I5 contains a value. If there's no customer associated with it, then what we're going to do is we're going to let the user know. So please make sure to add the customer before saving this order. Also, if B4 is empty, here's where we differentiate. This is going to be called a new order if B4 equals empty. However, else it's an existing order. If it's a new order, we need to do just a few things. So for those new orders, we need to determine the order row. And we're going to use the first available row on the orders database. I also want to set that next order ID. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the max formula right here to determine the next order ID. We're going to use that max based on that. We're going to add 1 to the maximum. If there's no data at all, it would return an error. Therefore, we're going to return 1. So this is going to get our next order ID, and we're going to place that directly in B3. I also want to place this in column A of the order database. I want to place it directly in column A. That's only for new orders. So these 3 lines of code for only new orders. For existing orders, all we need to do is extract the order from B4, that order row from B4. Here's where data mapping comes in. I've got 14 columns, 15 columns total, right, to add in, but 14 in this. So here's where data mapping comes in. All I need to do is loop through those columns. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract. Remember in row 1, we had that range. That range is coming from row 1 in the order. So whatever is in this cell, that order row and the order column, right, I want to put whatever data is in this range here, whatever data is in it, and I'm going to place it directly in that row and in that column. We're going to loop through all that to do that. That's going to add or update whatever data is there. So basically what it's going to do here, it's going to look inside M10 right here, and whatever's inside M10 here, it's going to place directly inside the associated row and that column here, whatever row we're focused on here. So that's going to add it in right here, whatever that is. So that's data mapping, 3 lines of code to update all of those rows. So that's it. Once we have that, what we need to do is then save the equipment. We've now then saved or updated all of this information here, but we haven't associated with any equipment. We'll pull an order. What about all the equipment? What I want to do is I want to loop through all the equipment, determine the last row of that equipment, and then what we're going to do is loop through that. And what I want to do is I want to associate a row with it. Now I'm going to place those rows right here. If I take a look here, they're here already, and I change that font color to red, we see that we've got rows, database rows associated with this, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those rows are right here inside our database rows, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? What I want to know is, has it been saved to a database? If it has, then update it. If not, then add a brand new row. So the first thing what we want to do is we want to check inside column G and the last row and check to see if it has been saved. So we can do that right here. Determine the last row. Of course, it's going to be based on H24, right? Column H is where we're going to put our equipment. H24 is the last possible row. So we're going to determine the last row here. In this case, of course, is 21. So what I want to do is I want to loop through that. If it's less than 18, then go to no equipment. So then we can just skip all that and go to no equipment. However, if there is values, what I want to do is I want to run a loop. So the equipment row is going to start at 18 and go to the last row. And then, as I mentioned to you, I want to check, has it been saved before? G will hold the key to that. Column G will let us know if it's been saved before. If I add a brand new item, G is going to be empty, right? So I know to save this in a brand new database row. So we're going to use G. If G in the equipment row equals empty, then it is a new database row. inside our order equipment database, we're going to get the first available row using the here. Once I have that first available row, I also want to set that database row, that specific database row that we put here. I want to put that in G. I want to put it right here. What else do I want to do? Well, I want to, for that new item, I also want to add that order ID, and I want to put that in column A. And inside column G, I want to set that row. I want to put a formula here called row, right? That's going to set the row up. So once I've done that, then what I want to do is I want to set those two things, right? Set the row in column G, set the order ID in column A. That's it for new. That's all I have to do. These 4 things for new items. If it is an existing item, again, just one thing. All I need to do is extract that row from whatever's in column G. For everything else, we're simply going to update the information, right? I want to take this equipment, the maintenance type, the location, and the frequency, and I want to put it directly in here. Equipment, maintenance type, location, frequency. And if there's a picture associated to it, I want to put that as well. Here, that picture is going to come directly from. That's going to help us because that picture is going to be helpful when we load it up. So to do that, we can just do here. Right? I want to make sure that that picture is all that's going to get saved. Now I'll show you how that picture comes in. It's going to be actually saved, going to located here. That picture name is going to be located right here. And I'm going to go over exactly how that got on a worksheet change event, how that picture name got here. We're just focused, once we finish this macro, we'll then go into that. So what I want to do is I want to take all this information, including the picture name located in column B, and I'll place those directly inside here. So that's all we have to do with these lines of code right here. We're just simply taking that and updating the database. And we're going to loop through each one. Okay, and then we're simply going to run that order saved message. Great, so you saw that. So that saved message is simply here. All we're going to do, it just simply takes a shape, this particular shape, order saved message, that shape that's on the sheet, and it's going to make it visible and then slowly fade it out and then make it invisible. That's all we're going to be doing. And basically what that is you saw that, maybe you didn't see it, but when I save that order, you're going to see in this order saved, we take a look at that and we can see it slowly fade out, and then it's simply going to become non-existent. Well, that's that fade out message. Very cool. It's a little bit slow. Probably should make it faster. Great. Now let's just skip, since we're focused on the equipment, I want to show you exactly, and notice now that we've saved it, we now have a new database row for this refrigerator, right? So that's it. Our new database row here, once we saved it, is located right here. Here we go. That's it. Okay, great. So we have that, but how do we actually get that information in? Back into orders. If I decide I'm going to add an equipment here, I want to make sure that that equipment, the picture, and the information gets saved here, and the frequency. Now it says every 1 year. Where does that come from? We know that we need to service this particular equipment every single year. So it comes directly from the equipment database, right? And notice we have a frequency here every 6 months, every 3 years, right? Our frequency is here. This is where it's saved. But if we take a look inside our equipment database located here, we have a frequency, a maintenance frequency every 6 months, every 1 year. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to combine these two, and I want to place them directly inside here, inside column K. I also, when adding, I want to take any picture that's associated and I want to place it directly inside column B. Okay, so that's based on a worksheet change event. When I make a worksheet change to column H18 through H23. So back inside our orders here, we're going to make it look in a worksheet change. We're focused on worksheet change here. So we're going to scroll down and we're looking for this on equipment change, but not on order load, not on order load. What do I mean the difference? When a user makes a change, that's one kind of change. When we select something, that's another kind of change, right? So I'm only focused on the worksheet change. So how do we differentiate between those two types of changes? Well, I can use a true false, right? So I can use this, what's in B7 called order load. If I select that, that's going to go to true very quick and go back to false, although you can't see it, it's too quick. But that's what happens. So I need to differentiate. So we certainly need to make sure that B7 is also false. So to do that, we're just going to check making sure that B7 equals false. In those instances, then what I want to do is I want to load that equipment in. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to delete any picture that might have been here. So when I add let's go ahead and select an order that doesn't have. So the first thing what I want to do is when I add it, I want to delete any picture that might already be here, right? So that air conditioning picture was there. If there's any picture here, I want to delete it. That picture is always going to have a specific name. We're going to call it equipment picture. Okay, so to do that, we can do this. On error resume next, delete equipment picture. If it doesn't exist, it could create an error. Therefore, we're wrapping it in on error resume next and on error go to 0. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that H is not empty, right? H contains our equipment name. That can't be empty. We're going to dimension the equipment database row. I need to know the database row that's associated on that. And what I want to do is I want to find the row of that. How do I know what row is on? This Bryant air conditioning, I want to know inside our equipment what row associated. That's going to be row 4. I'm going to use VBA to help us extract that row. But how do I know what row it is? Well, we have equipment names. If we go into the formulas and the name manager, we see that we have this named range called equipment name. It's an offset formula, equipment name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search this particular range and we're going to look to see if it's found. If it's found, I want to extract the row. We can do that with just a single line of code here. So that equipment database row equals equipment, that's the sheet, the equipment name, our named range. We're going to find something. We're going to find the target value. That means the value, the user that just changed. And I want to extract the row from that. If it's not found, it will create an error. Therefore, we've wrapped it in on error resume next and on error go to 0. Then all we need to do is run a test. If the equipment database equals 0, they have not entered a correct part. Please let them know with a message box to enter the correct item from the dropdown list. We're going to exit the sub. If it's not correct, we cannot move on. However, if it is correct, we can then move on. Now I have the row. I know what row it's associated. So what I want to do is I want to take that picture, and that picture is located directly in column I. And so I've got the row, I've got the column. I'm going to place that directly inside column B here of our order sheet. Right down here, I want to place it directly inside B. So as soon as I add an item here, I want to place that picture right in column B. I also want to place that frequency. That frequency is a combination of 2 rows, right? So when you take a look inside equipment, 2 columns, excuse me, it's based on the frequency and the column. So I want to combine both G and H. I want to place that directly inside K. Okay, so to do that, we could do this. So K is going to be equal to every, I want to use that word, and whatever's in G, then a space, and whatever's in H, right? So G and H, we're combining G and H to get us our frequency. This is our service frequency. So once we have that, we understand that it's going to put that frequency in there so we know how often it is. And that's it. That's all we have to do. But now what I want to do is I want to add a picture. As soon as I add an item here, I want that picture to be added. So when I add an item, I want that picture to be added, assuming that there is a picture here. And of course, we have a proper picture folder. If we remember inside our admin screen, I want those equipment pictures based on here. So we've got an equipment folder here. And so I want to combine that with the name, that folder combined with the name to create a full file path. And so we can do that here. So we're going to check it. So I want to add in that picture if applicable. Okay, so to do that, what I want to do is I want to check to make sure that B actually contains a value. If B is not empty, we know that there's at least the name of a picture there. Then what I want to do is I want to run a macro to show that picture. Now I want a separate macro to show that picture because it could run on selection change or a few different ways. That means I want to show that picture not only when they add it, but also when they select it. So the reason is that same macro is going to run on some different instances. So that's why we have it in a separate macro. So let's take a quick look at that macro and see just how we have it. So all we need to do is just right click here, and then what we're going to be doing is just look for the definition, and then we're going to find this one inside our orders called show equipment picture. So the first thing what we want to do is, of course, delete any picture that might be there. Remember, they're always named equipment picture, so we can delete it. What I want to do is I want to check for that equipment folder. Remember, it's very important to have that folder. It's located in the admin equipment folder. We've given it a specific name. If it equals empty, then let the user know to please add it. So message box. So for example, when you download this workbook and you get it from me, that folder should hopefully be empty. If I've not forgotten to do that, I'll make sure to do that. You're going to get this message because it's empty. Then you'll just run this macro, browse for equipment folder. We went over that macro. So what that's going to do is let the user know, hey, the folder's empty. So please select which folder those pictures are in. And then you can browse for that, and it's going to map that folder out. Now, what we're going to do is run another check. If it's still empty, then we're going to exit the sub. After they've gone there, there's nothing else we can do. Without a proper folder, we cannot display those pictures. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to know that selected row. B16 is going to handle that. B16, if I select a row, B16 is automatically going to let us know that selected row is going to be here. So as I select specific rows, I want to know what that row, that's based on selection change. When I make a selection change, that row is going to be based on B20. So whatever row we select, we're going to put that row inside. That's why B16 is very important. Once I know that, I know the selected row. So the equipment folder is going to be equal to, of course, the admin. I want to add that backslash onto it. I'm going to set the file path of that picture based on the equipment folder and whatever's in column B and the selected row, and that's our full picture file path. I'm going to make a check to make sure that that is accurate. If the directory of the file path does not equal empty, then we know it's a correct path. Then we can continue on. I'm going to insert that picture using the pictures.insert file path, just as we did with the equipment, and we're going to give it a specific name called equipment picture. Then what I want to do is I want to work with it. Again, with that specific picture that we just created, we're going to lock the aspect ratio so that it doesn't get contorted. I want to see if the width is greater than the height. If the width is greater than the height, I'm going to set the width at 85. Otherwise, I'm going to set the height at 70. That's going to make sure, because I want to make sure that that picture is contained within the cells. And then what I want to do is I want to center that picture. I want to center in between L18 and M23. I want to make sure that that picture, that there's equal space above and below and to the left and to the right. So no matter what picture is, it's always going to be centered within that cell range, right? Obviously we can move it, but it is be centered. So how do we do that? So first what I want to do is I want to check, I want to set the width. I want to set that size. I don't want it to go over too much. So we're setting the size. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that left position. That left position is going to start out based on L18, that's the column, the first column left, but I want to add to that, right? So it's going to start on this column here, L18 here, and then I'm going to move it over to the right. So I need to know how much to move it over. So we're going to be basing on the width of those two columns, columns L and M. I'm going to subtract the width of that picture. What is the actual width of that picture? So when we subtract that out, then I divide that by 2. It's going to put that equal space on both the left and the right side for the width. And that's going to center the picture horizontally. We can do exactly the same thing for the vertical, right? So we can, the top position, it's going to be based on the top position of L18 plus, what are we going to do? I want to take the height. This time we're focused on the height of rows 18 through 23. So 18, I want to know the height of that. And I also want to know the height of the picture. I'm going to subtract out the height of the picture, and then I'm going to divide that by 2, and that's going to get us equal distance on the top and the bottom. So we're going to take the height of that picture, dividing that by 2, and that's going to center the picture vertically. And then we're going to make sure that it is displayed, although it should already be displayed. When we automatically create it, it will automatically, just to make sure it's displayed. That's it. That's all we have to do to display the picture. Okay, so far, but we did go over it. So on selection change, right? We didn't go over the selection change event. I want something to happen. I want to load that picture. So let's take a look on that selection change. Back into the orders, we're going to scroll up, and we're looking for the selection change, right? Actually, down here, scroll down, selection change event. And we're going to select on specific cells. So what cells are those? Those are these cells here. On selection change, on selection change of equipment, and we want something to happen. Okay, so if we make that selection change between H18 and K23, that's the equipment, right? I want to first remember setting that row, that selected row, inside B18. So that's our selected row. Once we have our selected row, I want to see if I want to make sure that B is not empty, right? If B is not empty, we know that there's a picture here, right? We want to make sure that B is. So, because I want to display that picture automatically, but I want to check B to make sure it is. If it is not empty, then I want to display the picture. So then, if B is not empty, then run order show picture. That's the macro we just went over. Else, what if there's nothing there, right? Then I want to delete the picture. That's all we have to do on selection change. We just went over this macro here to display that picture, but this is the selection event that will display the picture when we actually make a change. Okay, great. So we've covered that. We've covered how to save work orders. We've covered a few other things. So we're going to go back into the order macros, and let's go over a summary of what we've been. We've already been over the loading the list, right? We know how to clear the filter. We know how to save and update those orders, right? And now what we understand how to run that save messages. We also went over how to show the equipment picture. So that was the next macro. And now continuing on after that, we now want to add a new order. We have to, of course, have a macro that's tied to this button here. And basically all that that's going to do is clear the contents of the existing cell. So that's relatively easy. with the orders, we're going to clear the contents of all of these cells. Of course, we can create a named range for that too. And I also want to delete any equipment pictures that might show up here. And then I want to select the customer I4 so they can quickly and easily, so if they were loaded in and we select something else, new order is going to quickly select it and allow them to add a new customer very easily. So selecting I4 is going to let them do that. Please keep in mind that you want to run this macro. This will create an error if the orders sheet is not visible, right? If I try to run this, you might get this sometimes. If I try to run this macro and I've selected another sheet, it's going to create an error. It's going to get a bug that looks like this. It's going to say E4 select, right? It's going to be run in that cell, and it basically says select method of range class failed. Why did it fail? It failed because we cannot select something unless we're actually on that sheet. As soon as I switch to that sheet and I continue with that macro, it's going to let us. So keep that in mind. A good way to do that, if you're trying to run these macros, is to activate the sheet inside VBA before doing the select. However, in this, we only run this macro from this button, and we can only be on this button when we're actually on that sheet. Okay, great. So we've covered adding new, but what about loading? Remember order loading. When do we load an order? We may load an order when we make a selection change on a specific order. How does that work? Well, again, back inside the order sheet here, if we want to load in a specific order, it is this one right here, on selection of orders. If the user makes a selection from E7 through F99, and we want to make sure that E contains a value, it's not empty, we did go over this, then we're going to load those orders. So I went over that briefly. Now we're going to focus on the macro that allows us to do that, and that's the load macro. So the first thing I want to do is I want to clear out all the cells. And the only thing I don't want to clear out is I certainly don't want to clear out the ones, I don't want to clear out the order ID, so B3 is not cut out. On new orders, we are clearing out B3, but on existing orders, we are not clearing out B3. Okay, so that B3 is not in here. Okay, I want to delete any pictures, okay, and I also want to make sure that B4 contains a value, right? I cannot load an order unless I have a specific row that's associated with that order. So we want to make sure that B4 contains a value. We're going to turn off screen updating, right? That's going to make things go a lot faster. And I want to set that order row inside B4. We're going to set that order row based on what is located in B4. That's going to set our order row. Then, of course, we're going to use our data mapping, but this time we're going to do it in reverse. And that means whatever is located inside our database, we're going to bring into the orders. How do we know what cell? Because we're going to use in, of course, row 1 of that database. That is our range. Whatever is going to be in there, whatever's located in our order row and order column, we're going to bring it over into that. We're going to loop again through 2 to 15, bring it over. This time we're doing the reverse. We're taking whatever's inside our database and we're bringing it inside our sheet form. Okay, then what I want to do is I want to trigger that address load. Remember that. I want to bring in also the customer, right? I want to bring in this customer, put it in directly in I4, right? So that's something separate, right? When I save it, I want to put whatever's saved here in I5, but I want to trigger that I4. I want to put that directly in here. That'll trigger it automatically. So I4 is going to equal to whatever's in I5. So we're going to take whatever's located directly inside I5. I'm going to put it inside I4. Why is that? Because let's take a look inside our orders database. I5 is our customer, right? That's not going to make the trigger. When I put that customer name in I5, nothing's going to happen. However, if I take that name and I put it directly inside I4, as soon as I make that change, it's going to automatically update. So that's why we have a separate line of code to trigger that address load. Then what I want to do is I want to load the associated equipment, right? Any equipment that's been associated for the job, I need to make sure we load it in. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to run an advanced filter based on all the equipment associated with this particular order ID. That order ID is located in B3. So I need to know from our orders equipment database, I need to run a advanced filter. And we're going to set that criteria based on whatever's in B3. So I need to know all of the items associated with that, all the equipment, and I want to return that value. I want those results to go directly in here. I want the picture, the frequency, the row, equipment name, and all that information, those results coming here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the picture, I'm going to put it into column B, as you saw before. I'm going to take that row into column G and then bring all this in. This information is going to come directly inside here. It's going to go right here. Okay, so we do that with an advanced filter. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to focus directly on that equipment database. Getting that last row there, running that last row as long as there's data within that, running an advanced filter all the way from A2 through G, using that criteria that we just mentioned in K2 that's linked automatically with a formula located right here in K3, K2, K3, and having those results come directly in N2 through S. Those results are coming here N2 through S. Going to get that last results row based on column N. If it's less than 3, we're exiting the sub. And then in just 2 lines of code, bringing in those pictures into column B, and then bringing the remaining information all the way from G through K, bringing them directly from O through S, and bringing them directly inside from G through K. And that's going to bring them all over there. So that's how we do it. That's all we do to bring in that information. And that's it. And then, of course, we're going to turn screen updating to true. Making sure that we're not exiting sub, going to no data, right, and going to no data. That's going to bring here. We cannot exit the sub at all. Make sure that we don't. Right? Exit the sub, we can exit the sub before, but if we turn application screen updating to false, we cannot exit the sub without turning application screen updating on. That is why it says if last row is less than 3, it doesn't say exit the sub, it goes to no data. It's going to skip everything here and making sure to run this screen updating to true. So watch that. I mean, oh, look, here it is right here. See, that easily happens, right? So we don't want to exit the sub, then go to no data, right? Here, we don't want to do that. So that's an easy mistake that I often make. You'll see that. So it's good. If I make the mistakes, you can see you'll probably make the same, right? We don't want to exit that sub out without actually updating that. So you can do that. All right, good. So now what if we want to delete an order? If I have a specific order I want to delete, and I just run this macro, giving the user the option to delete or not. Now we need to do a few things. When I delete an order, not only do I need to delete the line item here, but I also need to delete all the associated equipment here. Now, if I'm going to be deleting all the associated equipment with an order, I need to make sure that I'm deleting orders row 15 and 16. If I'm deleting order ID 6, I need to delete both of these orders. But if I delete row 15 first, then 16 is going to get off. So we need to always delete the highest row first and the lowest. So for example, if I load, let's go ahead and load order number 6 here, and we see that we're going to load in. If I'm going to delete those 2 rows, right, I want to delete orders 16 and 15, right, 15 and 16. The first thing I want to do is I want to resort this list so that 16 appears first and 15. And then I'm going to loop through those orders here, deleting row 16 first, then 15. That's very, very important because the rows can always have to, if we're deleting rows, we always want to do the highest row first and going down to the lowest row. So when we delete, that's very important. I'm going to walk you through the macro that does just that. So first of all, we want to give the user the option to get out. So we're going to ask them, are you sure you want to delete this order? Of course, if it's no, then we're simply going to exit the sub. And we're going to focusing on the orders. If B4 is empty, then maybe it's not saved, right? That's okay too. They can delete an order. So if I go into orders and I create a new order and I decide to create an order and then I decide, I don't want to do anything, right? I decide I'm going to just delete this order. Maybe we want to delete the order. All I need to do if I want to delete this order, say yes, and I want to make sure to clear it all out. But that has not been saved. So there's nothing I need to delete inside this order database. There's no equipment that I need here because it hasn't been saved yet. So we want to give the user the option to do that as well. So if B4 equals empty, that means it has not been saved. We're going to skip all the way down here and just run the new order. That's going to basically clear everything else and load the new list. But if it has been saved, there's certain things that we want to do, right? We want to set that order row inside B4. We also want to do is just delete that order row from the orders database, doing that. Now, the rest of it is simply clearing the equipment. It's a little more involved because, again, we have to run our advanced filter, and then we have to reverse the order of those rows and then delete them individually through a loop. So the first thing we want to do is determine the last row, right? The last row of that equipment database, run that exact same filter that we did using K2, getting all those numbers. Then we're going to determine the last row, right? We're running the advanced filter. We're getting that information in here. Let's load 6 again here because it's got 2 items. And so we're going to get that information here. But what I want to do then, once I have this, once I've run our criteria, run our advanced filter, gotten the 2 items, I would then want to perform a sort. So we've gotten to this for last row based on column N. If the last results row is less than 3, then go to not saved, right? If we have a single row, then we don't need to sort it. If I have just a single row of data, there's no need to sort it. So I'm going to skip the sorting, right? One, we can skip items automatically if there's no items at all. But if there's a single item, meaning the last results row is less than 4, that means there's only 1 row, then we can skip the sorting. But if there is rows, then I want to sort. I'm going to clear any sort fields. We're going to focus on the sort. I want to add a key, and of course I've got to call out this sheet again calling it out because I'm inside another width to sort. So we're going to base it on O3. That is our row. And of course, most importantly, descending. We want those highest rows first. And then of course, we're going to set our range. Again, calling out the sheet one more time, setting the range from the first row N3 all the way to the last results row, S and the last results row. We're going to apply that sort. That is going to sort it automatically reverse. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run our loop for the result row equals 3 to the last results row. I'm going to set that row in a variable called order equipment database row. Yeah, that's going to be that highest row first. Then, assuming it's greater than 3, the reason I don't want to delete 3 is because it involves this formula here. So generally what you would want to do is probably start this data on row 3. So bring this down one row, start your original data, but I just don't want to delete row 3 because I want to make sure. So keep that in mind. So if it's greater than 3, we can delete it, because if I delete 3, this formula is going to be gone. Okay, so I don't want that to happen. So that's why I've done that. So if the result row equals 3 to the last row, if it's greater than 3, here we go, then delete that row using this line of code. Don't remove the first row because there's a formula. That's all. And then all we need to do is just end with, of course, we're focused on that, and then run the macro that's new. This will automatically clear out all form fields, and then we're going to load the list, right? If I've deleted row 6, I want to make sure that that no longer is going to happen. So if I'm on 6 and I delete that order here, I want to reload that list. Delete this order, yes. I want to make sure that that list gets also reset. So loading that macro is also, now it goes from 5 to 7 and 6 is gone. And that's just how we do it. So if we take a look inside the equipment database, we see that there is no 6. Those lines of code have been deleted as well. Fantastic. So that's how we delete it in order. Very good. We're moving along very well. Printing out is very, very simple. If I want to print an order, it's going to default to the printer. So if I select here, it's going to print it out to whatever the default printer is. It's going to set that range. So there's not much going on in there right now, but you get the idea. All we need to do is just a single line of code, and all we also need to do is set the print range. So we're going to select down here, and we're going to set this as our specific print range. So that's pre-set up. And to do that, all we would need to do is just do page layout, and then what we're going to do is print area and set that print area. Okay, setting that print area. And it's going to print out whatever you want to do. That's relatively simple. Okay, moving on. Now what we're going to do is, remember I showed you this macro called, I told you about it, customer save update. That is the macro that is tied to this. So if I save an update, I want to do that thing. Now we have a fade out message called customer saved. Very simple. Same thing as with the order saved, but I want to save all this information. So the best thing to do that, again, I need to just differentiate it. Is it a new customer or is it an existing customer? This will tell us that, right? If we delete this here, I want to add in a brand new customer, right? And I want to put in a name. How do we know if it's a new customer or an existing customer? Well, we can use our customer row. So our customer row located here in B8. If B8 is empty, we know that it is going to need to be a brand new customer. I'm going to have to assign that a brand new ID. That customer is going to be new. We can use this field here. Again, just like we did with the orders, we're going to use that customer ID. Using the max formula +1, that's going to get us our next customer ID. So I know if the customer row is blank, we can create a brand new customer on the first available row here, and it's going to have the next customer is 13. So we can add that there. And we do that here. So first of all, if B8 equals empty, then we know it is a new customer. If it is a new customer, we're going to determine the first available customer row based on here. We're going to give it that next customer ID. That next customer ID is going to come directly from B9 using that max formula. Else, what if it's an existing customer? If it's an existing customer, then all we need to do is extract the row directly from B8. We already have the row. Everything else, again, we didn't use data mapping. You see, it can get kind of quiet. Again, I didn't necessarily use data mapping because I didn't want it here. But again, all we need to do is customer address, city, state, and just adding that customer information directly in here. That's all we have to do. And then just running the customer save message. That customer save message is exactly the same, except we're using a different shape called customer save message. That's it. That's all we have to do. Okay, cool. We've gone over that. We've gone over orders already so far. We've got scheduling and dashboard. This is a massive training, but I hope you're getting a ton of value in it. So we learned how to load orders, how to load the list, how to filter the list, how to create new orders, save or update orders, create new customers, save or update orders, add equipment, how to display equipment, and how to show pictures. Whew, that was a lot. Continuing on, what about the scheduling? We got this awesome schedule here. All those jobs are going to be scheduled. I might even add for our Patreon customers, I'll be adding drag and drop so we can change the date simply by drag and drop. If you want to see that, let me know and I'll put it on Patreon for those Patreon. If you're not a Patreon member, now is a fantastic time to show up because I will be there adding brand new features, fixes, or focus on those. So that's Patreon. I'll include the links down below. Okay, so what do I want to do here? So what I want to do is based on that scheduled date, I want to put those jobs in here. I want to color them based on the colors inside that. So if a particular order has an urgent, high, regular, I want to base the colors. I want to be able to change those colors, right? So if I decide I'm going to change this color, I want urgent to be this bright yellow. I probably wouldn't want to use that because I'm using a white font. But maybe I want to use a dark orange or dark blue or dark green. Let's say we don't have dark green. So I want urgent to be dark green. All I need to do is just change it here and automatically inside our schedule, if I refresh the schedule, it's automatically going to change to that dark green. So you see now it's dark green. Very, very simple. So we also have the icons, right? Pending is going to have this little icon. So I've assigned those icons and I've put them in a folder. Let's take a look inside that folder and we can see that we have the icons. I've got them inside this icons and attachment. I've got these icons completed, in progress, pending, and scheduled. So these are the four. Now they're actually colored just white, right? So they're PNG, they're transparent, they're all white, kind of hard to see, but they look great on this particular darker background colors. So we have those assigned inside the admin. So what I want to do is based on the data schedule, I want that shape to show up here and I want to be able to navigate that. Now we've got a calendar. Now I'm not going to go over too much on this calendar because it's relative to calendar, but it's based on the start date and uppercase. So we've created this really cool calendar. You can follow the formulas, download this and follow the formulas. I really want to focus on this because I've done this before. We've done this in many trainings where we create this really cool calendar. So it's all based on this and it's based on a bit of specific start date number, a month start date. What is the start date of the month? What is the month number, right? Is it January, February? What is the year, right? I need to know the year, the selected year, and I want to be able to use this to change the year. So if I change that year to 2023, I want to change those years. So we do have some scheduled for next year, which is kind of nice. So I also want to have that scheduled year. So again, we've got that year. I've got a set of years here. This is the named range, right? Those years are going to be based on that same named range directly inside this option. So if I format this, we can see that it's based on those years. We can also see that it's tied to B11. So B11 is going to let us know year. So this is 1, meaning our first year, 2022. So all I need to do to extract that year, I want to put that year here, is all I need to do is just simply index the years. B11 is going to index it, and then 1. So that's going to extract the year. If I know the year and I know the month, then I automatically know that start date because it's going to be based on B6 for our date year, B5 is our month, and the first day. So I want that first day. That's going to help us determine that. Okay, I also want to know the selected day. That's going to help us. I think that's going to help us one day in the future. So the month header, I want to know what month it is, right? B4, we know that B4, the start of month, text of B4, I want to know that it's February, right? So to do that, I'm going to set a date. So if I use the text B4, MMY year, I want to display both the month and the year inside this text box. If this specific text box is tied to B8, then whatever is in B8 is going to show up. So to get that, we're going to use the upper. We're going to use the text of B4 because B4 is the date, right? But I only want to display the full month and I only want to display the full year. That's all I want to display. And that's how we get this nice header here. Okay, moving on, right? I want to show, we don't need these here. These are copied from other things. I don't think we're going to need that. I will use that for probably maybe the drag and drop, but don't worry about this just yet. So keep that in mind. That'll come in the future. We don't need that. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need. We also want these icons. Don't worry about that. There's nothing more. So of course, when I do select an icon, there's a macro that's going to run. I want to show, I forgot to show you this. There's so many features. I always forget. I add so many features. It's insane. So I spent 3 days creating this. So let's take a look. So when I select it, I want that job, that job information to show here. Whatever I select, I want, so that's going to change. So I do add a macro to that. And these icons, right, I want them to show up. If I decide to change those icons, I want to copy, I want to take these icons here and I want to actually place them directly inside the schedule. I want to place them here. It is these icons in where we assign a macro to, and then we place them directly on this. So they all get placed on the orders. So let's see how we create this really incredible schedule here. So we're going to go into the module here. We're going to focus on the schedule, and it's called schedule refresh. It is that same macro that that's tied to this refresh button. So it's going to refresh. So on refresh, the first thing I want to do is I want to delete all of the shapes. Now they're given specific names. They all include, they're grouped, right? So we've got three parts of this. I've got the employee picture, the technician's picture. I've got the shape where we have the customer name, and I've also got the icon here. And so that's going to be tied in a group, and the group name that's associated is going to be the schedule order. If we take a look at that schedule order group 26, it's based on the order ID. So everything's displayed on the order ID, and it's called schedule order group. I've also given the icon a specific name too. That icon is called order icon 26. That shape is called schedule order 26. And the picture itself is also called, let's take a look, select that picture. It's called Tech Pick 26, right? So they have specific names that are associated with that. Now keep this in mind. When they select an icon, or when they select a shape, or when they select a picture, the same macro is going to run. So the thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to extract that number. I need to know, what I really need to know is that job ID, that number, schedule order. That's 26. That is order ID. That's what I want to extract, because it is that order ID that is going to help us do that. All right, so when I actually select an order, right, I want to know the order ID, right? So if we see the order ID here, if I select this, I want that order ID 32. It's going to load in all the details from the order. So we need to know, we need to extract that order ID. Okay, so let's keep that in mind as we move through the code. All right, so let's take a look inside here. We're going to focus on the scheduling, right? This module right here, schedule refresh. We're going to dimension. I'm not going to go over every single one of these, but as we go through them, right, we'll go ahead and show you them and display them, all those dimensions. So focus, first of all, I want to set the schedule change to true. This is going to help us add any loops. This will help us out moving forward. And I also want to clear any B2, any selected order. B2 is always going to take, if I select a specific order, I want to know the row of that, and that's going to this selected order row. That's going to be located in B2. So I want to make sure that we clear that out, so we can clear out all the. As soon as I clear that out, I want to make sure that's going to clear everything else out inside here. So notice how everything's cleared out, right? So when I select something, when I refresh the schedule, everything gets cleared out of here until I select something. All right, so we have the order details there. All right, so continuing moving forward, that's going to help us. That's why we want to clear out B2. So we don't want any selected order. Once, what I want to do is I want to clear out all the shapes. Notice there's a lot of shapes here, right? I want to clear out all of these shapes that are these particular orders. I want to clear them out. So I want to clear the icons, the shape, the group, and everything else out to make sure that we do that. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to check for specific names. Any shape that contains schedule order, we're going to clear that out, right? We're focusing on our shape, order shape, right? We're going to loop through every single order shape inside this sheet, just as we did in the schedule shapes, right? And I want to make sure that we are going to clear out all of those, delete them, right? Because we're going to be recreating them when we create the schedule. So that includes all the icons and all the tech pictures. So basically, this is going to delete all the shapes on the sheet that are only associated with that scheduler. So to do that, all right, now what I want to do is I want to refresh in case there's any icons that have been updated inside the admin. Remember, you might want to make some changes to these. So if these are names, these icons are names very specific in this folder, this icon attachment folder. So it's going to look. So if you decide you want to add another status here, you add another status, you add an associated icon. That icon will be located in that folder we just saw. So what I want to do is I want to loop through all these icons, and I want to add those icons into our schedule. I'm going to put them just on the left side, right? I'm just going to put them here. You can see them. If I zoom in, you can see them a little bit here on the left side. So we can see these four icons here. So I want to place them there, but first I want to clear out any icons that might be associated, any icons there. So notice the word icon. So those automatically got cleared out. Any icons that were there already automatically got cleared out using this, right? Anything with icon got cleared out. So we're going to add new ones, right? So the first thing I want to do is determine that icon folder. It's that icon attached folder. That's the one in the admin screen. If it's empty, we're just going to let the user know to browse for a specific folder, right? If it's empty, if it's still empty after they've browsed it, we're going to go to no icons. We're just going to skip that. Maybe they don't have any icons, so we're going to skip all that. If they do have icons, I want to run a loop from 1 to 5, right? There's up to 5 potential icons inside the admin screen. Notice it's starting on row 11, going all the way to 15, so there's 5 potential icons. So I'm going to run a loop from 1 to 5. And what we want to do is I want to check, of course, it starts on row 11, so I'm going to take that icon number, plus 10, that'll be 11 for our first row. And if it's not empty, that means there is possibly an icon, right? We know it's in column G, so that means if it's not empty, what I want to do is I want to combine this name along with this path and then create that icon. So we're going to do that here. The icon path is simply the icon folder plus the backslash plus whatever's in G and that icon row. So that's going to create our icon path. Then what I want to do is check to see if it's accurate using this formula. All right. If it is not empty, then it is an accurate path. We can then insert that picture using the icon path, giving it a specific name called icon and the icon number, right? So it's going to be icon 1, icon 2, 3, or 4, right? Based on that. Very important, those numbers, icon, right? We'll get into that a little bit later on. Okay, so now with the schedule, right, we're focusing on that schedule icon, this particular shape that we just created, we're going to set the left position in column A, set the top position in column A. Just basically, we can put it in any position. It's not necessarily important. And then all we're going to do is make sure that we assign a specific macro, right? That macro is going to be when I select, right? I want a macro that's assigned. When I go into the schedule and I select it, I want something to happen, right? When I select it, now basically I want the order details to load here. So that macro is very critical, right? So we want to assign a macro because the reason is when I create this schedule, I'm simply going to be duplicating. So all these icons get it. That's why there's an error when I selected this because there's no job, but there's no error when I select this, right? So keep that in mind that I want to assign the macro to those because when they get duplicated on the schedule, we want to that macro is going to be automatically assigned. Okay, we can also assign the macro when they get duplicated too. So that's another way to do it. I want to lock the aspect ratio and just set a height of 10. That's sufficient. Okay, that's it. So that's going to create those 4 little icons. Once we have that, we're going to focus on the orders database. And the reason I want to focus on the orders database is because I want to load all the orders in for February, right? So to do that, we're going to run basically an advanced filter for all of those scheduled for February based on this scheduled date. So to do that, I'm going to use a criteria. So I'm going to set the schedule criteria here. And it's going to be based on, remember, we have something called the month start date. So let's go back into the schedule and we take a look at this particular in B4. That's called month start. What is B4? That's the first day of whatever month. If I change that to the previous, this is going to change. So to do that, I want to run an advanced filter based on that. So I'm going to write, and of course we want those numbers. I want to show in number format. So basically I want it's any particular job that has greater, remember it's going to be and, I want 2, both of them are scheduled. I want it in 2 conditions. It's going to be and, not or, but and. And is side by side, or is above or below when we come to the advanced filters. This is an or here. This is an and here. Okay, so and greater than or equal to the month start and less than or equal to the last day of the month. So how do we get that? We're going to use the end of the month. So you're going to use less than or equals EO month, month start, and then 0 means no months ahead or no months before. So that's going to get us the last day of the month. I want to run an advanced filter based on those 2 conditions. I want all of those particular jobs to load here. Right here, all of them to load down here. So all the jobs in a month are going to have those results here. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. We're going to determine the last row here. If the last row is less than, you're going to exit the sub, right? And then I want to make sure that we haven't turned on screen updating. We're going to do that down here, making sure that we're not exiting when screen updating is false. Okay, first of all, we're going to clear any results in the orders database. AE, want to clear any results that may have been there before. I'm going to run that advanced filter based on that criteria we just spoke of. We're having those results come directly here from AE2. What I want to do is I want to determine the last row of the results. The last row of those results here is 49, determining that based on column AE. That's going to get us here the last results row based on column AE. If the last results row is less than 3, then we're going to exit the sub. Now we turn on application screen updating false, right? So we cannot exit the sub out unless we turn it back on after this point. Okay, I want to sort them based on the time. I want those earliest to come first, right? Regardless of date, date will be handled later, but I want to know those earliest, right? Those 6 a.m. first, and I want to know also the 4 p.m. This 4 a.m. is not accurate, huh? But it's sufficient. Basically, 4 a.m. should not looking good, right? It's not 4 a.m. comes before. Should be sorted. I'll check that out. AH3 is where our sorting should be based on that. So I want to sort them based on the time. I want the lowest time first. It's that way they just end up in order, although I'm going to check on that. It didn't quite work. 4 a.m. Usually it's simply because it's not numerical. It's not recognizing this as a time, right? 10 a.m. This is not correct. And when you see things like this, it's probably usually, 4 p.m. That's clearly like this 10 a.m. This is clearly out of order. So why would that happen? Probably because it's not regarded. If I take a look at this and I go back to general, we see it's 1.4. That's not a correct number, 4, right? Anything less than 1. So this isn't, sometimes Excel doesn't handle times very well, right? A times should all be less than 1, right? A time must be less than 1, 0.4, something like that. So these are simply incorrect. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. So that's why it is sorting properly, right? But these are not correct, right? So basically, if it's a time, maybe if we re-enter that, but it's not, maybe it's adding a date onto that. Notice it's adding a date onto that. If I erase that date, right? Just keep in mind it's a data issue and change it to 10 a.m. Now let's go ahead and change that. Let's go back to the home and go back to general, right? This is what a time should look like, less than 1. So that basically means they've got a date. It's just a data issue, but the sorting is working correctly, okay? Keep that in mind. So it's a data issue. This is what, and that's really why I like having things in numbers, right? When they're in numbers, then I can clearly see when there's a data issue, right? So keep that in mind. So it's definitely a data issue. We want to sort based on time. I want those first. Times to be first. And why is that? Because when we are creating that schedule, I want those first scheduled ones, those first before put first and those after second. So that's why I want them sorted based on time. So moving on. So we're going to sort those based on time. So we do that here, sorting based on H3. We're going to sort all the data. And of course we want it ascending, meaning the earliest first. Okay, once they're all sorted, then I'm going to loop through all of the results. I want to loop through every single result inside that, starting in 3 and going all the way down. And I want to extract the information. I want to know the order ID, the customer, the scheduled date, very important. And I want to know the technician, and very, very important. So I want to extract that information as we loop. So we're going to do that through here in some variables. The order ID is going to come from AE, the scheduled date from AG. The scheduled time is going to come from CD in the result row, and I also want to, again, format that time, right? Not only do I want to pull it out, I want to make sure it's formatted based on this AM, PM. Okay, that's going to give it a specific format. What I want to do is I want to start and I want to put some text in there, right? I want to put the customer name, I want to put 6 a.m., and I want to put Betty White customer. I want to combine those on the schedule and make that into the text. So, for example, inside our schedule, right, I want to show both of those inside that, very possibly. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. But for now, we just have the customer name in there. We could show both the start times and that. So I have that both. We may want to put that in the order text, schedule time, and that. That's incorrect. All right. Our schedule time, of course, is AH. So let's fix that. That's why it's not displaying. But I still may not want both there because it's too much, right? So AH and the result row is where it is not CD, right? Okay. But now if we take a look at it, I still may not want to have those times. It's probably too much. But let's take a look in that schedule, refreshing that. Right? Because, okay, so it's good. We now have that, but now we're losing half the customer name. So it kind of gives us an idea, right? It's maybe a little bit too much information, but you can see, you can easily add both those. I'm not sure if I like it, but again, maybe we'll reduce the font size. Okay, let's continue on. We can discuss that later. Okay, but you can see both. We want the schedule time, right, and the customer inside that. If you want just the customer alone, of course, you just have to remove this and we can have that. Let's stick with just the customer, right, because we can see the times. Let's stick with the customer because that's fine, but you can add that in there. Okay, so saving our work, of course, moving forward. What I also want to know is the technician name is going to come from AJ, and the start and the, let's put in the customer, no longer a start. The technician name comes from AJ, but I also want to know the tech. Not only do I want to know the technician name, I want to know the row. Why is the technician row important? Right? If I pull out the technician name from Fred, but I want to show Fred's picture, right? I want to show the technician who's been assigned, and that is that picture that I want to show on the schedule, right? The technician. So how do I do that? Well, that picture is located inside here, inside our technicians, and it's located on row L. So what I need to do is I need to determine what row our technician is. If it's Fred, it's row 4, and if I know the technician's on row 4, I want to extract that picture from column L. So the first thing what I want to do is take that name and get the row number. So we're going to do just that. We're going to extract the name from column AJ and the technician name. Let's pull that back up so we can see AJ coming directly from here. And then what I want to do is I want to extract that number. So what I'm going to do is take that technician row. If there's an error, if it's not found, I'm going to run the find from the technicians technician name. I'm going to find that technician. I'm going to extract that row. If it's not found, it could create an error. Therefore, I've wrapped it in on error resume next and on error go to 0. So now we've got the tech row. And I want to do that also for order status, right? Order status is going to come from 𝐴K. So if we take a look inside our order status here in 𝐴K, we see that our status, I'll expand that, pending, process, and stuff, and so on. So I want to get that order status. But if we take a look in the admin screen, I want to know the icon that's associated with this status. Pending has the pending icon, scheduled, and so on and so forth. But I also need to know what row this is on because I need to extract the icon that's associated with the status. So we're going to have to do that too. So the icon number, we'll call it icon number or icon row, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Remember, that's important, is going to be the admin status. I have a named range called status, right? So this named range here, if we go down here to status, we can see that. Let's go to the name manager and to see the status. If I take a look, I've got a name called status. Okay, this is going to be an offset formula for all of our statuses. So what I want to do is use that named range and extract, determine what row it is on, right? Row 11, 12, and then remove 10, right? If I know pending is on row 11, if I subtract 10, we are going to get 1. Because I want 1, 2, 3, or 4. Why do I want that? Because our icon names are the exact same names. Going back into the schedule, remember those icons that we created here? Right? This is called icon 1 here. You see that? The next one's called icon 2 and so on and so forth. So that's what I want to extract. That's why I want to get numbers. So that's exactly what we're going to do inside the code. We're going to determine the icon number and we're going to use the admin status. We're going to look for the order status, right? That order status we have here. And of course, we're going to subtract 10 to get the icon number. This will give us the row that it's on. The first one will get us 11, but I want to know it's icon 1. So subtracting 10 will get us that. So this, we know the icon number is 1. If we combine this with it, we get the right shape. Also, I want to know the order priority, right? Now let's take a look back inside our order database. Our order priority is going to come directly urgent, regular, low, or high, right? If we take a look inside our admin screen, we have the colors that are assigned to this. Urgent, we know is green. Let's set that back to something, a proper color, maybe this darker maroon. So let's try that one more time, not the font. Okay, let's set that back to maroon. Okay, so our urgent takes on this color. So I also need to extract the row from our priorities. If I know inside D11, our urgent is located in row 11, I know to extract the color from column D and that row. So also we need to get that. So our order priority comes from L. Now I also want the day order count. What is that? I want to know the order result and the schedule date. What is that order count? Well, that's very important. I want to know the number of orders that are associated in a specific day, right? If I look at the schedule, I know that this day has 2 orders. Why is that important? Because I don't want them on top of each other. I know if a day has 2 orders and I keep track of the number of orders in a day, I know that we're going to put, this one has 2 orders, so I'm going to put one first and the second one right below. So we need to keep track of the number of orders in a single day. This one's going to do it. So we're going to run our count if. I want to know that scheduled date, how many orders are based on the results. We have a named range called order results date. I want to go over that named range with you right now. Taking a look inside our results here, formulas, name manager, and we're going to call it order results. So if I look here under order results date, we see an offset formula based on the results. Here's the dancing ants around that scheduled date. So I created a named range based on these results. I want to know all of the specific instances of a certain date, and I want to count them, okay? So we're going to keep track of that count. So the day order count is the number of days inside that, right? Number of days, right? So if there's 3 appointments in a day, this will return 3. So it's going to count the number for a specific date. Then what I want to do is I want to set a priority row. Priority, what is that? We have an order priority. I want to find that. If we take a look in the order priority, remember it's order priority. That's when we need urgent regular. So I want to find that. I want to know what row because we have to set the color. I want to know what row that priority is at 11, 12, 13, or 14. I want to know the row so that I can extract the formula. We're going to use the find to do just that. So that order priority is simply going to be admin priority find the order priority, and it's going to extract that row. Once I have the row, I'll be able to extract the color from that. And again, we're going to wrap it on error. If the order priority is not 0, that means that priority was found. We're going to set that order color. I want to put that into a string, the color of that. That color is going to be based on, remember, column D is where that color is. The interior color of whatever row that was found, the interior color. So it's going to be the interior color of this, or this, okay? So we're going to grab that interior color because it is that interior color that I also need to color the shape with, So, all right, so now if the day order count is greater than 10, I want to set the maximum number of orders in a specific day to 10, right? I don't want any more than that. So if the day order count is greater than 1, I'm going to set the order number to equal the order number plus 1. So we're going to increment the number of orders in a day, okay? That's all we're going to do. The order number equals 1, we're going to get the row number. I only want to get the row number, I column on a new day. So we're setting the order number to 1. Then, if the order number equals 1, get row and column on new days. So 4, we're going to loop through. We're going to loop through all of the days. And I want to determine what day, right? I need to run 2 loops. I want to see where we're going to place that, right? I'm going to run a loop from the rows are going to be all the way from 4 all the way to the last row, 34, right? But of course, I'm going to skip 6, right? I'm going to go from 4 to 10 to 16, right? And then I want to also run a loop from the columns. If we look at this is column E, right? And I also want to run a loop all the way to the last column. The last column is L. So I want to run, from 5, right? E is column 5 to 11. I want to run a loop. And basically what I want to do is I want to look inside. Is this a day? This is actually a day. Is it the first day? Or it's simply formatted, right? This is actually the date. It's custom format that's only showing the day. If we were going to show the full date, the short date, it would show this date, right? So this is actually a date. Each one are actual dates. They're simply formatted to show only the day number, okay? So that's all we have to do. So if we take a look inside that, we go into more number formats, it's a custom format. All I want to show is the day. So to do that, I just type in D, and it's going to show only the day. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to look for that date. If that date is found, I'm going to loop through all of these, keep going until I find the right date. If it's found, I am then going to place it on there. So we do just that. So again, for the calendar of the rows, or 4 to 34, we're skipping 6, right? We'll just keep going down, right? I'm not going to go 4, 5, 6. I'm going to go 4, 10, 16. So we're skipping 6. So the rows are skipping. The columns are 5 to 11. Now what we're going to do is we're going to simply check to see if the date, if the schedule, the cells, the row and the column, that value, that date, if it's equal to the schedule date, then we know that we are going to replace. We're going to set that schedule row to equal the calendar row. We're going to set that schedule column to equal the calendar column. And we're going to go to create an order. We're going to create that order. We're going to skip everything else. So as soon as the date is found, we're going to skip out of these loops. It's going to go all the way to here, create order. Okay, right here. We're going to skip it. But if it's not found, we're going to keep running our loop. If the order number equals 6, then the schedule row equals the schedule row minus 4. What does that mean? Basically, all we're going to be doing is we're just going to keep running that loop through all the days in the calendar, looking to find the schedule date. If it's found, it is then going to add those. So that's all we're going to be doing, is looping out through those. Okay, so we just need to keep track of that schedule row so we can keep track so we know where to place that shape. So that schedule row keeps changing. Okay, so if the schedule row equals 0 or the schedule column equals 0, if it's not found, then we're simply going to go to the next order. So now, assuming that it is found, right, we're going to do the following. The schedule, we've got a sample order shape, right? What I want to do is I want to create this first shape. And we have a sample order right here. Let's refresh that schedule. I think the times are, not really like the times. It's too much data. So refreshing the data, we remove those times, just the names are sufficient. And so what I have is a sample shape here. This particular shape is our sample shape. It's called sample order shape. This shape doesn't get deleted. I've got another shape here for the picture called sample tech picture. So this is the shape that we're going to duplicate, sample tech picture. So we're going to run that. We're going to duplicate that. We're going to give it a specific name called schedule order. And also I want the order ID. So that's giving it a very unique name. Now what I want to do is I want to place that, right? I want to place that. I need to know how many scheduled, right? So if the day order count is greater than 5, I want to set the order width. And basically what that's going to do is if we have more than 5 jobs in a day, I want to cut that in half. Basically, I want to split the width of that in half. So we do that with just this code. So if then the schedule, the width of that entire thing, I want to divide that, this order width, I want to set that order width into a variable. That order width is going to be half of the width of that column. half of the width of the column. Otherwise, it is going to be the full width of the column. So based on the number of orders, it's either going to be the full width or the half the width. So that's all we have to do. If it's greater than 5, right? So if the day order count, so we're counting the number of days, right? I want to know if it's more than 5, right? If we have more than 5 scheduled appointments a day, split it in half, okay? If also I want to set the left position, right? That left position, if the order number is greater than 5, then set the order left position to be +2, right? So basically we're setting the left, moving it over to the right. The order, we're keeping track of the order numbers. As the order numbers grow, right? I want to set the left position. So we actually have 2 columns, right? 1 column and 2 columns. So we have 2 specific columns inside. So that way we can fit up to 10 different orders in a single day using 2 columns. So it's either going to be a single column or 2 columns. So that's why we have that. That's why we have that update that left position, right? Based on that. Otherwise, if it's less than, right, if we're less than 5, right, then all we need to do is just place it on the left position. So now we're ready to create. So all we did was simply create, then update that left position and update the width of that. Now we're ready to place it. So with the schedule the shapes, the order with that shape that we just created, we're going to place it on the order left. We're also going to place the top position based on the top position of +1, right? The schedule top plus the schedule row +1. We're incrementing that schedule row as we increase them, right? So the schedule row will increase the number of specific jobs a day. This gets incremented based on the number. Then also I want to set that order width. Remember that order width is going to be, the width is either going to be half if it's more than 5 or the full width of the column based on that order width. Setting a very specific height. I also want to put that order text, remember that text, that customer name, or maybe we have the time and the customer. That's going to be the text of that shape using the text frame, text range, and text rate. Also on action, assigning a macro to that same macro that gets assigned, that's going to assign a macro to that when we select an order. If the order color is not empty, then we're going to fill that shape with the specific order color based on that priority. Remember, we already added that order color here. Remember, we extracted that order color all the way up here. Let's take a look at it. I want to find that again. That order color is right here inside the order color based on D, that interior color. So now we're applying that to the specific shape right here. So that's it. That's all we have to do to place the shape. But what we want to do is I also want to eventually group these. I want to group these 3 into a single group. And to do that, I want to keep track of everything we added in that. I want to know the back of the name of the shape. I want to know the name of the icon, and I want to know the name because I want to group all 3 of those. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a string with all the names of the shapes, all 3 of those names inside a string. So we're going to start that string out right here. The group string, it's a string, equals the schedule order and the schedule order ID. So this is the beginning of it. As we add the icons and as we add the pictures, that'll grow. Okay. Adding the icons if applicable. Okay, so if we have an order status that's not empty and we have an icon number that's not 0, it will be 0 if it's not found, then we can add an icon. So the first thing what I want to do is take that icon and the icon number. This is where that icon number 1, 2, 3, or 4 is so important. Taking that icon and the icon number, we're duplicating it and we're giving it a brand new name called order icon and order ID. So that's creating that icon. Then what we're going to do is we're going to place that order with that shape's order icon. I'm going to place it directly on the left position, +4, means a little bit over to the right. And I'm going to give it a top position of the same top position of that we placed for that shape and +3. So we give it that a little bit lower than that. And also assigning the macro, right? This may not be necessary as we're duplicating it. We're already assigning a macro. It's already assigned. So again, we're making sure that the macro is assigned. And now we're going to build up that string. So that string is equal to whatever's already there. I'm going to add a comma as a delimiter to separate those shapes. Then we're adding that shape to our string because I'm going to group it. Now what I want to do is add that technician picture, right? So adding that technician, remember we need to have a technician row. It has to have been found, so we need to make sure that it's not 0. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a path. I want to know that full file path. It's going to be that technician folder and the backslash, and I want to get that technician picture. Remember, it's located on the technicians column L in the technician row. That's where our technician picture is located. Here's the full file path. I'm going to check to make sure it's accurate. If the directory, tech path, BB directory, of course, does not equal empty, if it's equal empty, then go to no tech. It's simply going to skip here if it's not correct. However, if it is a correct path, we can then create it. So to do that, we're going to call out the schedule sheet, shapes, sample text picture. We're going to duplicate that, right? I want to duplicate this particular icon, this particular shape, this circle shape. I want to duplicate that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill that shape with the text picture. If we were filling a shape, we would just do the format and fill the shape, right? So if I bring this up here, right click, format the shape, and use the fill properties, right? If we use a picture or text fill, if we insert a picture, right, that's the same thing as we're going to do it inside VBA right now. Okay, so that's all we would do inside. So now, but we don't really want to have a picture, so we don't need any picture for that. All right, so again, returning it back to the way it was, we can just simply escape out of there. We don't need that. Okay, so all right, continue on. That's exactly what I want to do, VBA through filling it. So let's take a look inside here. With schedule shapes, text pick in order. We're going to focus on that. We've duplicated that shape now, but we haven't filled it with any picture. We've simply duplicated it. We're going to fill that specific shape, that brand new shape that we just created, duplicated it, given a specific name. We're going to fill it with a picture using the fill user picture text path. Okay, we're going to set the left position to be the ordered left, right? That left position plus the entire width of that original shape, right? The entire width of that oval shape. The entire width, I want it the entire width of this minus the width of that picture shape, minus the width of the picture. That's going to set the left position. The top position is also going to be based on the schedule row +1 and the top. This is going to set our top position. And again, we want to also assign the macro to that same exact macro that we're going to use. Also, we want to build up that string. I want to add whatever's in that string, and now I want to add, again, separating it by a comma, the text picture and the order ID. That's going to build the string for the group. Let's put that build string to group shapes. Okay, great. So now what I want to do is we're going to group the shapes. That's the last thing we have to do. We're going to create an array called group array. We're going to split that string based on those commas we added. So what that's going to do is going to separate it into possibly 3 different shapes. We're going to create an array of those shapes. Based on that array, I can then group those based on that array. So using the schedule shapes range, this particular array, we're going to group it, and we're going to give it a specific name called schedule group and the order. That order ID, that creates a group. So now you see each one, if I select it, has a specific name. So selecting here, called schedule order group 32. It's based on this ID here, 32. Very, very cool. That's it. That's all we have to do. I want to, of course, clear out as we loop through those. We want to make sure that the order text is empty and the group string is empty. So we're going to clear those out, making sure that as we loop through each one. That's it. And of course, if the order number is greater than the day count, we're setting the order number. Reset the order number on the last order of the day. Okay. And then we're going to loop throughout. So we loop through everything on that. And then, of course, turn application screen updating back onto true. Very cool. All right, you saw that. Now that's really cool. But now you see also when we select it, remember that macro we have, it is that macro that's going to load all this information. Well, this is really, really easy. All I need to do is create a formula. So I have something called order data here. Order data is, of course, the entire data on that. So if we go into the formulas, name manager, we take a look at order data. It encompasses the entire data set of that order. Of course, I've used a table before in this case, but we're going to just use this. And so we've got this entire data using the offset. Of course, we're going to use all 15 columns on this time. So I want to create that. And now what I have is I have all the information on that from the first column, right, all the way out. So all I need to do is I need to extract that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I want to know the row of that. So I want to know, so for example, this particular order is called order. This is order ID 26. I want to know what row that's on. I want to know it's on 28. If we look in the order database, right, and we look at row 28 here, we scroll over, we see that 26, order ID 26 is located on 28. I want to take the row of that using the macro, and I want to place it directly inside that particular cell, B2. Once I know the row, I can then extract all the information from that. I can extract that order ID. And I can use a formula to do that. First of all, if B2 is empty, then just show empty. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run an index based on that order ID. And I want to know what row is it, right? So that I'm going to use B2 minus 3. B2, of course, that row, I'm going to subtract 3 out because we're indexing, right? That first row data is going to be indexed. And we're subtracting 3. Then what I want to do is I also want to know what column, right? This is column 1, right? I know that order ID, if we take a look inside this, it is column 1 of our data, right? Column 1, right? our data starts right here in column A, our first column here. I want the order ID. So I know the order ID is on our first column, right? If we take a look back on our schedule, I know this row is 4, right? So how do I get from this specific row, how do I get column number 1? Well, I simply take whatever row it's on and I subtract 3. If I take whatever row it's on, I subtract 3, it's going to get us 1. For the customer, I know the customer is in the second column. If I take this row here and I subtract 3, this row, of course, is row 5. So if I subtract 3, I'm going to get 2, and that's going to. So all I need to do is then copy this and bring it down for all the formulas. Just paste in those formulas. That's all I have to do to extract all the information. All I need to know absolutely is that, of course, B2 has to have a value. But what if it's empty? If it's empty, I don't want to show anything, right? I want this to be completely clear. Well, how did I do that? It's just gone right there. Well, I use conditional formatting to do that. So let's go inside that and go into the conditional formatting and manage those rules. And we take a look. If B2 is empty, what do I want to show, right? I want to show this, right? I want to show the font. So our font, our original font, is already, let's look at this, our font color here is the same as the background, right? Our font color. However, it is the conditional formatting, right? If I change this to black font, we see that we have some. But our original font is the same as the background. It is conditional formatting, that rule there that makes the black font, right? That format here in the font makes it, that sets this automatic or black font here automatically, okay? So that's how we do it. So that's if B2 equals empty, that's all we need to do. But what if it's not empty? Then I want to show it. We also want to show alternating rows. Let's take a look here. Here, alternating rows, formatting, here's where we get the colored font, right? Here's where we get the colored font, and I also want those alternating row colors here. So that's all we have to do. There's where we get the font. That's the row I was looking for. This one is the mod row. This one also, so I want white and blue alternating. Edit this row. We see we've also got a format here, a font color, a specific font color of this blue, this darker blue, and I've got the fill, this fill color of blue. So that way, but that's only if, right, I want to make sure that M4 does not equal empty, and that's also if. So that to make sure that M4 does not equal empty. We can change that, update M4. That's fine. M4 is sufficient enough for that. And so that's how we do it. So as soon as I answer something, as soon as I put something in here, right, a specific row or anything like that, it's automatically going to display those details right here, selected order. All right, very, very, very cool. We've covered that. Now we've covered the schedule. That's it. Let's take a look in back here. So all I have to do really is here is simply extract that order ID. So we're going to take that order ID and the order row is long. That order ID we're simply extracting from this shape, right? Now keep this in mind here. To do that, right, we don't know what they're going to select. I don't know if they're going to select this. I don't know if they're going to select the icon. And I don't know if they're going to select the picture. But I've named each one of them very carefully. What I've done is I've given them each one 7 characters. Let's take a look inside here. Each one 7 characters and then the number. SC order, right, 7 characters. In this one, the icon, if we take a look at this icon here, selecting that, it's called order icon. Another 7 characters, then the number. The same thing with this pick. Tech pick, 7 characters, then the number. So if I remove the first 7 characters, what's it going to leave us with? It's going to leave us with that order ID. And that's just what I did here. We're going to use the replace. And what am I going to do? I'm going to take those first 7 using left of the shape name that called it, application caller, those first 7, I'm going to replace it with nothing. That's going to leave us with the order ID. From that order ID, all I need to do then is extract the row. We're going to use the find. Again, we're going to use the find using our order ID, extracting that, and we're going to subtract the row from that. I want to know the row, extracting the order row from the order ID using the named range. And then as long as it's not 0, if it is 0, we're going to exit the sub out. If it's not 0, I'm going to take that row. I'm going to place it directly in B2. And then what I want to do is I just simply want to select the group so that I know which one is selected. So selecting it, I know the group name is schedule order group. Remember, we grouped those shapes up here. We gave it a specific name here. So if I know that and I know the order ID here, we can select it. That way we automatically select it. So anytime they select it, it's automatically selected. And that's going to help for something like drag and drop, or it's going to help so we can clearly see which one was selected. So we know that there. All right, great. Previous month, relatively simple. Next month, we'll go quickly over that. Previous month, all I need to do is simply reduce the month number there until the last one. And if we get to the last one, meaning the first day, right, our schedule doesn't go before 2022, it doesn't go before January, let the user know. Okay, and if we go next month, all we need to do again is increase the month number and possibly increase the year if we're already on the last month of the year. So that's all we need to do here. With the schedule B11, if it's 1 and B5 equals 1, that means we're on the first year and we're on the first month. Let the user know you're on the first month and first year, exit the sub, right? Can't go before that. However, if it is B5 equals 1, then what I need to do, we need to go to the next. If we're in January, right, and we're going previous, we need to go 1, reduce the year 1, and also change the month to December. So that's what we do here. B11 takes, of course, our year. We're going to take whatever year is there, and we're going to subtract it by 1. We're going to the previous year, and we're going to set the month to December. However, if it's not January, all we're going to do is then decrease the month by 1 and then just run the macro to schedule refresh. Next month, relatively the same thing. We're going to make sure that we're not on the last month of the last year, which is 12. We're going to let them know you're on the last month of the year. Okay, if it's not, now what I want to do is I want to know if we're in December and we're going to the next month, I got to change the month to January and I got to increase the year 1. So B11 simply going to be B11. The next year, we're incrementing the 1 up. We're incrementing the year up 1. And also, we're going to set that month to January. What if it's not January, right? We're going to set the month. What if it's not January? Then, this is not December, right? We're checking for December. So I'll update that. December. We're checking for, if it's not December, then we're simply going to increase the month by 1 and refresh the schedule. This month is relatively easy. This month, if we click this month, I want to know that we're on the selected month. And we do that with just simple. We want to know what, of course, that month is. So what we're going to do is I want to know the month. B5 is simply equal to the month of the current date, putting that in. And then also what I want to know is B11 equals the year. I want to know the current year, right? I want to put that current year inside, of course, B, but basically I want to find it. I want to set this one, right? I want to find what is the current year. I want to find it here, and I want to put, in case it's 1, like let's say 2022, I want to put that right here because our years are controlled by this. So if the current year is 2025, right? If it's found here, I want to put 4 here, depending upon based on whatever the year is. So that way, when I do this month, it automatically changes to 1 because it is the first year. So we're going to do that here. B11 is simply equal to the scheduled years I'm going to look for. I'm going to find that current year. I'm going to look for it inside years. Basically, I'm running a find, and I'm looking for it in this named range called years. If it's found, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, say it's found on row 18. I'm going to subtract 17 and place that number right here. So we do that here, subtracting 17, finding it, whatever row it's been found on, subtracting 17, then just running the schedule refresh. That is it for the schedule. Okay, very cool. Last but not least, this was a massive training. Massive. I did a lot of programming in the last 3 days. Okay, we have this really, really cool dashboard. I don't create a lot of dashboards like this, but I will do more in the future if you guys want. It's kind of a very limited dashboard, but it's very, very cool. We're using a few slicers. And what we did is we're going to take our data basically from this. So I created a table, right? I created a table, and we're calling it orders. So this table is orders, and we created some pivot tables from that order. So we have several pivot tables right here. So all I did is I created a pivot table called here. So this particular pivot table, let's drop this down. We'll be using it a little bit more than we will. And I want to show the tabs and ribbon. Okay, so I created a little bit of a pivot table here called status. So I want to create a specific status based on this pivot table. Of course, all we need to do that is inside the order database, and then just inside the table design, we have different options. So we can create pivot tables, we can insert slicers, and do a whole lot of great work. So that's what we're going to do here. So we created just simply by inserting, and of course we're going to insert that pivot table like this, and we're going to insert it. Of course, we want to insert it from a table or range, and we want to insert, I want to put it on the existing worksheet. I want to put it on a brand new worksheet. So we want to give it a specific location. And so if I give it another location, just here, click OK. And that's going to create a pivot table. So I created one just like this, and I want to base it on status. So that's what I did right here. Based on the order ID, I want to know, based on the order ID, all those completed, all those in process, pending. So we create just that. And that's all I did. Let's bring this back up here so we can show more information. So I want to count the number of order IDs, and I want to set the rows based on status. So all we do is just bring the status in here, and we bring the order IDs in the values here. And I'm going to count by the orders. I want to know that. So that's going to give us a count of all the orders. And then what I want to do is I want to create a slicer based on that. So if I want to create a slicer, right, inside the pivot table, analyze, I just want to create a little bit of a slicer for that. The design, we can do lots of different things here. So on the pivot table, we can create a slicer on that. So to do that, we just insert a slicer. And what do I want to do? I want to base it on the status. So we'll create that status slicer. And it is this slicer. Of course, we don't need to show blank here, right? So we can remove that. I only want to show maybe completed, process, pending, and we can do that. So it is that slicer that I'm actually going to bring over, right? We can also move or copy it, right? If we want to do that, simply bring it, or we can copy it over the slicer. So I did just that inside the dashboard, creating this slicer here called priority. And now what we want to do is I want to know maybe all the processes are all only with high priority. We know that those projects that are in process that have a high priority, 38 are in process, 58 are scheduled. Or we can hold down the control and no more, and just selecting these, right? So as we move down, we can also clear the filter here. So basically all I did was simply create a chart, a pivot chart field based on that. So we have a pivot chart fields based on that. So this is this chart right here. If we select the data here, we see that it is based on these particular work maintenance manager pivot table status by priority. Status by priority. And I just created this little bar chart here based on that. Relatively simple. So this is this bar chart that we have. So if we take a look in this, and then I just give it a little bit of a format and fade and stuff like that. So an order status and all of these. So it's just a chart without a background, and I just put it on this brown background. That's really it. And then again, we did the same pretty much thing for the same data. We don't need this anymore. I can delete that. And I can clear that out, clear that later. I also want to know how many orders based on their status, right? How many based on the rows. So I want to know which ones are high, which ones are low. So I created another pivot table, and I want to know it by completion date. So I created this timeline based on that, right? So if we want to know that, we want to do a timeline, we can insert a timeline based on that. And this is this time based on what? Based on the completion date. I want to know how many are completed, right? And that's going to give us, we can have years, quantity, months, and it's based on that data. So I just simply brought in that data. And then I'm going to bring this over, right? If I want to move that, I can remove the timeline, refresh it. I can do lots of things with that timeline. We can refresh it. So that's simply a timeline. We can copy and paste that and bring it inside here. So we can bring those pivot tables and bring it inside here. And that's just what I have here. So we have job priorities. Let's do that by completion, extend that a little bit. And so I know that. So I want to know how many are urgent. Maybe I want to create this. So I can create several different shapes. And these particular shapes, these strings are located based on the pivot table, right? Based on that pivot table. Pivot table is K5, K6, K7, K8. So if we look back in our pivot tables, and it's all based on these numbers here. We can also create an index range. I know it's a lot of data here. We're going to index based on these. So we have always, so this way they're dynamic based on the admin. So we can count the tuples. I want to know how much. Creating an index based on this. Once I have that, we can create our numbers, and then I can link a shape based to these. And I can also create it. So since this, as I add these, notice these numbers change based on the month. So we create a timeline based on that. And it is this timeline that we can do. So that's going to automatically change. If I want to select them all, I can increase this timeline and nodes based on that. Very, very cool timelines. And I just simply added this photo here. I've got a cover. So basically shapes that we filled with the photo here. Just simply shapes and pictures and photos and a fade out. Very cool. I know I'm moving quick, but my voice is going, and it's like almost 3 hours on this training. Same thing. I've created, of course, a donut shape based on this, also based on a pivot table. Here we take a look. We've got here More information. We've got technicians based on the completed. We want to know the number of technicians based on that. Based on the status we have here in the dashboard, status by technicians. Here we have another really cool slicer here based on the number of things. So I've created these additional slicers based on this, based on the technician. If I want to know the technicians based on this, I have a different slicer that I've created here based on that. And of course, it's all based on this particular information here. Same thing if we do this here, it's exactly the same thing. However, we are simply bringing that information over and bringing it based on this dashboard here. But we don't want to show blank, right? We don't want to show blank. So all we need to do is make sure that we are not showing blank. All I need to do here is just bring it up right here. Let's do this and hide that blank because I don't want to show that blank. So just bring the original data up here. That's going to affect it in the dashboard as well. So notice how the dashboard just updated. So we can create slicers based on this, slicers based on the data. Very cool. And lastly, we have this really cool required skills. I want to add in a pivot table based on those required skills. And that's this pivot table here. I want to know the number of required skills. We have the count, the percentage. I want to know the total number of skills because those skills are very important. What jobs are requiring the most skills, right? We know that pumps and motors, 15% of the jobs, 12 have electrical, 12 have HVAC, and I want to bring those inside this really cool donut shape here. So we have the 10 required skills. So it's all based on that data, right? So if we see select data, it's based on that pivot table 24, which is all the information on that. And I just created that in a format of that. That is pretty much it. All right, go ahead and download this. Make sure you like it. Thanks so much for sticking with me on this extra training. I know I went kind of fast on this dashboard here, but go ahead and download it, right? Take a look at it. Let me know if you have any questions. Of course, Patreon platform is the way to go when you want to ask more questions. You want to get more features, or you want me to focus on a specific area. If you want me to focus more on this dashboard, our Patreon platform as well. Next week, I'll be creating a training based on this, and I'll be adding more features. That's our Patreon. You can click down links below. Thank you so much for joining us on this epic work order maintenance training. We completed a brand new dashboard. We've got orders. You can create orders. We've created a brand new schedule. We've got equipment with pictures, technicians and customers, and of course, a really dynamic admin screen. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week for a brand new training. Thank you very much.